Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. When I first heard about Whisper Ridge, I had been working in Appalachian locations for 11 years. That's longer than many truckers have spent on these mountain roads. Long enough to know which hills will burn out your brakes, which truck stops water down their diesel fuel, and which dispatchers aren't telling the truth when they say a route is easy. The mountains never forgive mistakes, and they certainly don't care how many years you've been driving a truck. I picked up the load in Asheville on a Tuesday in October. Automotive parts headed to a distribution center outside Beckley, West Virginia. A standard load, nothing special. It was the kind of haul I could manage half asleep, which was good because I'd been dealing with a blown tire outside Knoxville since 4 that morning. My dispatcher, a woman named Carol, who'd been routing trucks since before I was born, called me around noon. Her voice crackled through the phone with that particular brand of exhaustion that comes from spending too many years in a windowless office. "Got a load for you, Decker," she said. "Asheville to Beckley. Should be a milk run." I was finishing up a lukewarm coffee at a pilot outside of Bristol when she called. The coffee tasted like it had been sitting on the burner since the Carter administration, but it was hot and it was caffeinated, which was all that mattered. "What's the timeline?" I asked. "Pick up at 1600, delivery by 0800 tomorrow. You'll have plenty of time." I did the math in my head. Asheville to Beckley was roughly 250 miles, give or take. With the mountain roads, figure maybe 6 hours of actual driving, plus mandatory breaks. It was tight, but doable. "Weather?" I asked. There was a pause on the other end. Carol was shuffling papers, probably looking at 3 different loads while talking to me. "Clear tonight. Might get some fog in the higher elevations, but nothing you can't handle." "All right, send me the details." "Already in your system. And Decker?" Her voice changed slightly, got a little quieter. "Take the main route. Don't let your GPS talk you into any shortcuts." It was an odd thing to say. Carol wasn't the type to mother hen her drivers. In 11 years, she'd never once told me which route to take, only where to go and when to be there. "Something I should know about?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. "Just take the main route. Adds maybe 20 minutes, but it's better road. Trust me on this one." I wanted to ask more, but a truck driver's relationship with his dispatcher is a delicate thing. You don't question them too much, and they don't give you the worst loads. It's an unspoken agreement. "Copy that," I said. "Main route it is." She hung up without saying goodbye, which wasn't unusual. Carol had probably 3 more calls to make before she could even think about taking a lunch break. I finished my coffee and climbed back into my truck. It was a 2015 Peterbilt 579, dark blue, with just enough miles on it to be broken in but not beaten down. I'd bought it used 3 years ago from a driver who was retiring, and it had been good to me. The engine was solid, the cab was comfortable, and most importantly, it had never left me stranded on the side of the road. The drive to Asheville was uneventful. Interstate 40 through the Smokies is one of the prettier stretches of highway in the country, if you're the type to notice that sort of thing. I'm not usually. When you drive for a living, scenery becomes background noise. But that day, for some reason, I found myself actually looking at the mountains as I passed through them. They were old, these mountains. Not like the Rockies out west, all jagged and dramatic. The Appalachians were worn down, rounded by time and weather. They had a weight to them, a presence that you could feel even from the highway. Dense forests climbed their slopes. trees packed so tight in places that you couldn't see more than a few yards into them. I got to the warehouse in Asheville a little before 4. The place was exactly what you'd expect. A massive metal building with a couple dozen loading docks, forklifts buzzing around like angry bees, and dock workers who looked like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. A guy named Tommy checked me in. He was maybe 25, with the kind of scraggly beard that said he was trying to look older than he was. "You're headed to Beckley?" he asked, glancing at his clipboard. "That's the plan. Long haul for a Tuesday night. Not my first rodeo." He nodded and went back to his paperwork. 20 minutes later, I was loaded up and ready to roll. Automotive parts, like Carol had said. The load was decent weight, probably 35,000 pounds, but nothing my truck couldn't handle. I pulled out of the warehouse at 4:30, which put me right on schedule. The sun was starting to sink toward the western ridges, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In another couple of hours, it would be full dark. The route Carol had sent me was straightforward enough. Take Highway 19 north out of Asheville, catch Interstate 26 through the mountains, then pick up various state routes that would eventually dump me onto Highway 19 again, which would take me straight into Beckley. The whole trip formed a rough arc through the heart of the Appalachians. I programmed the route into my GPS and settled in for the drive. The first hour was easy. The roads were good, traffic was light, and my truck was running smooth. I had the radio tuned to a classic rock station out of Asheville, and they were playing all the hits. Skynyrd, ZZ Top, the Eagles. The kind of music that makes long drives go faster. But as I climbed higher into the mountains, the station started to fade. First, it was just a little static, then more, until finally all I could hear was the occasional burst of music fighting through the white noise. I scanned through the dial, but everything up here was either religious programming or country music that was just a little too twangy for my taste. I shut the radio off and drove in silence. That's when I started to notice the fog. It came in gradually, the way it usually does in the mountains. First, just wisps of it, thin tendrils reaching across the road like fingers. Then thicker patches that my headlights turned into solid walls of white. Then, as I climbed higher, it became a constant presence, reducing visibility to maybe 50 yards on a good stretch. I slowed down. No sense in being stupid about it. The last thing I needed was to come around a blind curve and plow into a broken-down car, or a deer frozen in my headlights. The GPS showed I was on State Route 226, winding my way through a section of the mountains that didn't even have a name on the map. Just empty green space marked with elevation lines. The road itself was in decent shape. 2 lanes, well-maintained, with guardrails on the sharper curves. But it was steep and winding, the kind of road that required constant attention. I'd been driving for about 2.5 hours when my CB radio crackled to life. At first, it was just static. I'd had the CB off since leaving Asheville. Not many trucks on these back roads, and I wasn't in the mood for chatter anyway. But it had turned itself on somehow, which wasn't entirely unusual. Old CBs sometimes picked up stray signals, especially in the mountains. I reached over to turn it off, but before I could, I heard something. A voice. Or at least I thought it was a voice. It was hard to tell through the static. Just a low sound, almost like someone breathing into the microphone. "Hello?" I said into the receiver, more out of habit than any real expectation of a response. The static continued for a moment, then seemed to fade slightly. In the gap, I could hear what sounded like wind, not the clean sound of wind through trees, but something else, something that made me think of tunnels, of enclosed spaces. "This is Decker on 226 northbound," I said, trying again. "Anyone out there?" Nothing but that wind tunnel sound. Then, just as I was about to give up and shut the thing off, I heard it. A single word, barely audible through the static. 74. I stopped breathing, just for a second, because the voice, if it was a voice, didn't sound right. It was too flat, too monotone, like someone reading a number off a list without any inflection or emotion. "Say again," I said into the radio. "You're breaking up." 74. Same word, same flat delivery. I checked my speedometer instinctively, even though I knew I was only doing about 45 on these curves. The number meant nothing to me. "What's at 74?" I asked. But the static had returned, thick and impenetrable. I tried a few more times to raise whoever it was, but got nothing. Finally, I shut the CB off and focused on the road. Mile marker 74 showed up about 15 minutes later. I wouldn't have even noticed it if I hadn't been looking. It was just a small, green sign on the right side of the road, reflecting white in my headlights. Nothing special about it. But as I passed it, something made me glance in my side mirror. That's when I saw the light. It was way back in the trees, maybe 100 yards off the road. Just a single point of yellow light, steady and unmoving. Could have been anything. A house, a cabin, someone camping. The mountains were full of people who lived off the grid, in places you couldn't reach except by foot or four-wheeler. But something about it bothered me. Maybe it was the radio voice still echoing in my head. Maybe it was just the fog and the isolation getting to me. But I found myself pressing a little harder on the gas, wanting to put some distance between me and that light. I drove for another 20 minutes before I realized I needed to pull over. Not because I was tired. The opposite, actually. I was wide awake, every nerve ending firing. But my hands were cramping from gripping the wheel too tight, and I needed to stretch my legs. There was a small pullout coming up, just a widening in the shoulder where the road crew probably parked their trucks when they were working on this stretch. I eased my truck into it and shut off the engine. The silence was immediate and total. No other cars, no wind, nothing. Just the tick, tick, tick of my engine cooling down and the soft patter of moisture dripping from the trees. I sat there for a minute, trying to shake off the weird feeling that had been building since I heard that voice on the CB. It was nothing, just a stray transmission, maybe from a highway patrol officer calling out a mile marker on some other road. The mountains did funny things to radio signals. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and stepped out of the cab. The fog was thick enough that I could barely see the front of my truck. The air was cold and damp, and I could see my breath in the glow of my flashlight. I did a quick walk around, checking my tires and making sure nothing had come loose. Everything looked good. As I was finishing up, I noticed something that made me stop. There were tire tracks in the soft shoulder just behind my truck, fresh ones, cutting through the wet leaves and mud. They curved off the road and into the trees, as if someone had pulled over and then driven straight into the forest. Now, that wasn't necessarily strange. Like I said, there were people who lived up here, and they had to get to their homes somehow. But these tracks were deep, like whatever made them was carrying a heavy load, and they were wide, wider than a typical pickup truck. They looked like they came from another semi. I followed them with my flashlight, but they disappeared into the fog after maybe 20 feet. I stood there at the edge of the trees, listening. Nothing, just that same heavy silence. I was about to turn back to my truck when I heard it. Breathing. Not animal breathing. I'd heard enough bears and deer in my years on these roads to know what that sounded like. This was human, slow, deliberate breaths, like someone trying very hard to stay quiet. "Hello?" I called out, shining my flashlight into the trees. The breathing stopped. I waited, every muscle in my body tense. My hand found the heavy maglite on my belt, the one I kept for emergencies. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "I know someone's there," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. If you need help, I've got a CB. I can call for someone." Nothing. Just the soft drip of water from the leaves. I stood there for what felt like 10 minutes, but was probably only one. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the CB radio voice. That same flat, emotionless tone. But this time it wasn't coming through a speaker. It was coming from the woods. 74. I didn't wait to hear more. I was back in my truck in seconds, engine roaring to life, tires spitting gravel as I pulled back onto the road. My hands were shaking on the wheel, and I had to force myself to breathe normally. It wasn't until I'd put 5 miles between me and that pullout that I started to calm down. Even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a very big mistake by stopping. The GPS showed I was making good time despite the fog. Another hour, and I'd be out of the mountains and onto flatter terrain. Another 2 hours after that, and I'd be in Beckley, unloading my cargo and finding a decent hotel room for the night. I just had to keep driving. The road straightened out for a stretch, running along a ridgeline. On a clear day, I bet the view would have been spectacular, but in the fog, all I could see was the guardrail on my right and the solid wall of rock on my left. The white line down the middle of the road was my only guide, stretching endlessly ahead into the murk. I'd been on this straight section for maybe 10 minutes when I noticed something odd. There was a smell in the cab. Not a bad smell exactly, but unusual. Like ozone, the way the air smells before a thunderstorm. Sharp and electric. I checked all my gauges. Everything was normal. Engine temp good, oil pressure fine, no warning lights. But the smell was getting stronger. Then I realized it wasn't coming from the engine. It was coming from the CB radio. I stared at the unit mounted on my dash. It was still off. I'd shut it off after hearing that voice, and I was certain I hadn't turned it back on. But as I watched, the little green power light flickered once, twice. Then the static started. It was quiet at first, barely audible over the engine. But it grew louder, that familiar crackle and hiss of empty airwaves. I reached over to shut it off completely, to pull the power connection. But before I could, the static resolved into that voice again. 74. I yanked the power cord out of the socket. The radio went dead, the green light fading to black. But the voice continued. 74, 74, 74. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from behind me, from the sleeper cab. I've driven trucks long enough to know that your mind can play tricks on you during night hauls. The isolation, the monotony, the fatigue, it all adds up. I've had moments where I could have sworn I saw someone standing on the side of the road, only to realize it was just a mailbox or a stump. I've heard voices on the CB that turned out to be nothing but static patterns that my tired brain interpreted as speech. But this was different. This was clear and distinct, and coming from behind my seat. I pulled over, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I couldn't drive like this with every nerve in my body screaming that something was wrong. This time, there was no pullout, just a wider spot in the shoulder where I could get my truck mostly off the road. I put on my hazards and sat there, engine running, staring at the curtain that separated the cab from the sleeper. The voice had stopped. Everything was quiet again. "This is stupid," I said out loud to no one. "You're tired. You're hearing things." I didn't believe myself, but I needed to check. Needed to prove that there was nothing back there, that it was all in my head. I grabbed my flashlight and turned around in my seat. The curtain was closed, the way I always left it. I reached out and pulled it aside. The sleeper was empty. Of course it was empty. Just my bunk, neatly made, and the small amount of personal gear I kept back there. A duffel bag with a change of clothes. A paperback book I'd been meaning to read. a picture of my ex-wife that I kept forgetting to throw away. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. But as I shined the flashlight around, I noticed something that made me pause. The window in the back of the sleeper, the small one that looked out the rear of the truck, it was fogged up, completely covered in condensation, as if someone had been breathing on it. I reached out and touched the glass. It was cold, so cold that my finger almost stuck to it. And there, in the fog on the window, someone had written a number. I got back on the road so fast I almost stalled the engine. This time, I didn't care about the fog or the curves or anything else. I just needed to get off this mountain, away from this road, away from whatever the hell was happening. The GPS showed mile marker 74 was now behind me, back where I'd made my first stop. I was at mile 82 now, climbing toward a pass that would take me over the ridge and down the other side. Once I cleared the pass, it was mostly downhill to Beckley. I just had to make it to the top. The road got steeper. My truck downshifted, engine growling as it pulled the grade. The fog was thicker than ever up here, and I was down to maybe 30 yards of visibility. I should have been scared, or at least nervous, but all I felt was a desperate need to keep moving. I'd been climbing for about 15 minutes when I saw the lights in my side mirror. At first, I thought it was another truck coming up behind me, but the lights were wrong. Too yellow, too dim, and they weren't moving right. They would appear for a few seconds, then disappear, then appear again farther back, like someone was turning a flashlight on and off in the fog. I pressed harder on the gas, but my truck was already maxed out on this grade. I couldn't go any faster without risking burning out my transmission. The lights kept pace, never getting closer but never falling behind either. They would appear in my mirror, 2 small points of yellow, and then vanish. Sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right, sometimes both mirrors at once, as if whatever was carrying them had split in 2. Then my CB radio came back to life. I hadn't plugged it back in. The power cord was still dangling loose below the dashboard where I'd yanked it out. But the radio was on anyway, glowing green in the darkness of the cab. And this time, the voice was different. Not that flat, mechanical tone from before. This voice had emotion. Fear. "Get off the road," it said, clear as day. "Get off the road now. Don't stop it." Static swallowed the rest. I grabbed the microphone even though I knew it wouldn't work without power. "Who is this?" I shouted into it. "What's happening?" The static cleared for just a moment, and I heard what sounded like wind. That same tunnel wind sound from before, and underneath it, barely audible, a sound that might have been screaming. Then the voice again, desperate now. "Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop at 74, don't." The radio exploded. Not literally, but close enough. Sparks shot out of the speaker and smoke began pouring from the unit. I yanked my fire extinguisher from its mount and sprayed the radio until the smoke stopped. The cab smelled like burning plastic and ozone. I looked up just in time to see the curve. I'd been so focused on the radio that I'd let the truck drift toward the center line. Now, I was heading straight for the rock face on the left side of the road. I cranked the wheel hard right, feeling the truck lean as it responded. Too hard. The trailer swung wide, and for a terrible second, I felt the wheels on the right side lose contact with the pavement. I was going over the edge. Time did that thing it does in moments like this where everything slows down and you become hyper-aware of every detail. I could see the guardrail coming up in my headlights, old and rusted. I could feel the exact moment when my truck's momentum shifted from controllable to not. I could hear the metal shrieking as the guardrail caught my trailer and held. The truck stopped. I was angled across both lanes, my trailer partly over the edge, but I'd stopped. I sat there, hands still death gripping the wheel, and tried to remember how to breathe. It took me 5 minutes to get the truck straightened out and back fully on the road. The trailer had some scrapes along the side, and I'd probably need to replace some running lights, but overall, I'd gotten lucky. Incredibly lucky. I pulled forward slowly, checking every few seconds to make sure the truck was responding normally. Everything seemed okay. The engine was fine, the steering was fine, the brakes were fine. I just needed to keep driving. Forget about the lights in the mirror, forget about the voice on the radio, forget about the number on the window. Just drive until I reached Beckley and daylight and other people. That's when I saw the sign. It was on the right side of the road, partially hidden by fog. An old wooden sign, the kind that local fire departments used to mark rural roads before the county came through with official markers. Whisper Ridge Road, it said, mile 74. I stared at it as I drove past. That was impossible. I'd already passed mile 74. I'd been climbing for the past 20 minutes, had to be at mile 85 or 90 by now. There was no way I could be back at 74. But there it was. I checked my GPS. The little blue dot showing my position was exactly where it should be, moving steadily northeast along my programmed route. According to the GPS, I'd never gone backward. I was right on schedule, but the sign said different. I kept driving. What else could I do? But I couldn't stop my eyes from flicking to the side mirror, checking for those lights. They were gone now, or at least I couldn't see them through the fog. The road began to level out. I'd reached the pass, was starting my descent down the other side. The fog was clearing slightly and I could make out the shapes of trees on either side of the road. That's when I noticed the truck on the shoulder. It was another semi, maybe a quarter mile ahead, hazard lights blinking in the fog. As I got closer, I could see it was an older model Freightliner. Dark green, with some kind of logo on the door that I couldn't quite make out. I slowed down, pulling alongside it. The truck looked abandoned. No lights on in the cab, no sign of movement. But the engine was running. I could hear it idling, could see the wisp of exhaust from the stack. I pulled in front of it and stopped, leaving my own truck running. This was probably a mistake. I should have just kept going, let someone else deal with it. But truck drivers look out for each other on these roads. If someone was broken down or hurt, I couldn't just leave them. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from my cab. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees since my last stop. My breath came out in thick clouds. I walked back toward the other truck, playing my flashlight over it. The trailer was definitely loaded. I could tell by the way the suspension sagged. Whatever was in there was heavy. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone need help?" No answer. I walked around to the driver's side and shined my light up at the cab. The door was closed, but I could see through the window. The cab was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. No trash in the cup holders, no paperwork on the dash, no CB radio, no GPS. It was like someone had stripped everything out except the steering wheel. But the truck was running. The engine was running and the lights were on, and the hazards were blinking. I tried the door, locked. I walked around to the passenger side, also locked. That's when I noticed the trailer doors. They were slightly open, swaying gently in the breeze. I could see the chain was hanging loose, the lock missing. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get back in my truck and drive away. But I needed to know, needed to see. I walked to the back of the trailer and pulled one of the doors open wider. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness inside, illuminating nothing. The trailer was empty, completely empty. Not even the normal debris you'd find in a used trailer. No broken pallets, no straps, no cardboard. Just bare metal walls and floor, except for one thing. There was writing on the inside of the door, scratched into the metal like someone had used a knife or a nail. I had to lean in close to read it in the glow of my flashlight. Turned back at 74 too late. They're in the fog. Below that, scratched so deep the metal was curled up at the edges. Don't stop. I stepped back from the trailer, my flashlight hand shaking. I turned to head back to my truck and froze. There was someone standing between me and my cab. I couldn't see details through the fog, just a dark shape, human-sized, perfectly still. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your truck running okay? Engine's still on." The shape didn't move, didn't respond. I took a step to the left, trying to get around them. The shape mirrored my movement, staying between me and my truck. "Look, I don't want any trouble," I said. "I'm just trying to—" The shape moved then, and I saw it clearly for just a second as it stepped into the beam of my flashlight. It wasn't a person. I don't know what it was. It had the rough shape of a person, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But the proportions were wrong. The arms too long, hanging past where knees should be. The head tilted at an angle that no human neck could manage. And it was wet. Not like it had been caught in rain, but like it had just climbed out of water. Liquid dripped from it, pattering onto the pavement. It opened what might have been a mouth, and that voice came out. That flat, mechanical voice from the CB, 74. I ran. Not back to my truck. That thing was between me and it. I ran forward, along the shoulder, into the fog. Behind me, I could hear wet footsteps slapping against the pavement, keeping pace. I don't know how long I ran. Could have been 30 seconds. Could have been 5 minutes. The fog was so thick I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. I just kept moving. My boots pounding against the shoulder, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Then I burst through the fog and found myself on the road again. My truck was right there, maybe 20 yards ahead. I could see it clearly now, hazard lights blinking. I didn't question it. I just ran for the cab, yanked the door open and threw myself inside. I slammed the door and locked it, then punched the button to lock all the doors. I sat there, gasping for breath, waiting for something to happen. For that thing to appear in my headlights or scratch at the door, or do whatever the hell it was going to do. But nothing came. I looked in my mirrors. The other truck was gone. Just empty road stretching behind me into the fog. I put my truck in gear and drove. Slowly at first, then faster as my nerves steadied. I didn't see anything else on the road. No lights in the mirror, no shapes in the fog, nothing. The mile markers counted up. 83, 84, 85, I'd made it past 74. For real this time, I could feel it. The fog began to clear as I descended the far side of the pass. By the time I hit mile marker 90, I could see stars through gaps in the clouds. Real, normal stars. I drove for another hour in silence, checking my mirrors every few seconds, but there was nothing behind me except empty road. The shaking in my hands gradually subsided. My breathing returned to normal. By the time I reached the Beckley Distribution Center, the sun was starting to rise. Pink and orange light was spreading across the sky, burning away the last of the fog. I could see the industrial buildings of the city ahead, could smell diesel and asphalt and all the normal smells of the civilization. I'd never been so happy to see a loading dock in my life. The dock manager at the Beckley Distribution Center was a guy named Frank Briggs. I'd delivered to this location maybe a dozen times over the years, and Frank was always the same. Gruff, efficient, more interested in getting trucks unloaded than in small talk. Which was fine by me. I wasn't in the mood for talking. "You look like hell," Frank said as I handed him the paperwork. "Long night," I said. He grunted and initialed the forms. "Bay 7, should have you out of here in 30. I backed my trailer into Bay 7 and killed the engine. While Frank's crew unloaded my cargo, I sat in the cab and tried to process what had happened on Whisper Ridge. The rational part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive for 11 years on these roads, wanted to explain it all away. I'd been tired, driving through heavy fog on an unfamiliar road. I'd let Carol's weird warning about taking the main route get into my head, and then the strange CB transmissions had amplified my anxiety. The rest was just my exhausted mind playing tricks. The writing in that abandoned trailer could have been from any time. Truckers sometimes scratched messages into trailers. Usually jokes or complaints about dispatchers, but sometimes darker things. Maybe that particular trailer had been involved in something bad, and some previous driver had scratched that warning. The thing I'd seen. Fog does strange things to light and shadow. Probably just a person, maybe homeless or high on something wandering around that pullout. The wet appearance could have been rain, or maybe they'd been washing something. The weird proportions, just my imagination, amplified by adrenaline and fear. The GPS anomaly, the repeating mile markers, equipment malfunction. Happens all the time, especially in mountains where satellite signals get wonky. I had explanations for everything, but I didn't believe a single one of them. "All done," Frank said, knocking on my cab door. "You sticking around or heading back out?" I checked my watch, 6:30 a.m. Carol would probably have another load for me by afternoon, but I needed sleep first. Real sleep, not the fitful half-dozing I sometimes did in truck stop parking lots. "Got a decent motel around here?" I asked. "There's a Best Western about 3 miles up the road. Clean, quiet, won't rob you blind." "Perfect, thanks, Frank." I pulled out of the distribution center and found the motel. By 7 a.m., I was checked in, showered, and lying on a bed that felt like heaven compared to my truck's sleeper. I should have crashed immediately. I was exhausted, running on maybe 3 hours of sleep in the past 36 hours. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing standing in the fog. Those 2 long arms, that impossible angle of its head. Finally, around 8:30, I gave up on sleep. I grabbed my laptop from my truck and went back to my room. If I wasn't going to sleep, I might as well do some research. I started with the obvious: Whisper Ridge and Mile 74. The first few pages of results were useless. Tourism sites for the region, hiking trail information, a historical society page about mining in the Appalachians. Nothing relevant. I tried Whisper Ridge accidents and got more hits. There were several articles about trucking accidents in the region over the years. A jackknifed semi in 2015. A fuel tanker that went over an embankment in 2008. A head-on collision in 2003 that killed 4 people. None of them mentioned mile marker 74 specifically, but they all occurred on the same general stretch of State Route 226 that I'd been driving. I kept digging. After about an hour, I found something interesting buried in a local news archive from 1987. The article was short, just 3 paragraphs. Missing. Trucker's vehicle found. The vehicle belonging to Richard Mason, 43, of Bristol, Tennessee, was discovered Thursday on State Route 226 near mile marker 74. Mason had been reported missing by his employer after failing to complete a delivery to Beckley, West Virginia. The tractor-trailer was found idling on the shoulder with its hazard lights on. Mason was not in the vehicle, and an initial search of the surrounding area found no sign of him. "It's like he just got out and walked away," said State Police Trooper William Hardy. His personal effects were still in the cab. No sign of struggle or foul play. We're continuing the investigation. I read the article 3 times. Then I searched for Richard Mason's name. Nothing. No follow-up articles, no obituary, no resolution to his disappearance. He'd simply vanished into the archives, another unsolved mystery in a region full of them. I found 2 more similar cases. In 1993, a trucker named Dale Archer disappeared under identical circumstances. Truck found running on 226. Driver gone. In 2001, a driver named Marcus Cole. Same story, all near mile marker 74. I sat back from my laptop, feeling cold despite the room's heating. 3 disappeared truckers over 15 years, maybe more if I kept digging, all on the same stretch of road. My phone rang. It was Carol. "Morning, Decker," she said. "Frank said you delivered clean. You available for another run?" "Yeah," I said, still staring at my laptop screen. "What have you got?" "Nothing until Monday, light week. You can head back to Bristol if you want, or stick around Beckley. Your call." "Carol," I said, "last night, when you told me to take the main route, what was that about?" There was a long pause on the other end. "Just safer road conditions," she finally said. "Bullshit." Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, like she didn't want anyone in her office to hear. "I've been routing trucks for 32 years, Decker. Some roads, they just have a feel to them. You get what I'm saying?" "No," I said, even though I did. "Look, I've had drivers go up that section of 226, and some of them come back different. Rattled. One guy quit the industry entirely, went to work at a hardware store. Said he'd never drive at night again. I don't ask questions. I just try to route people around it when I can. You could have told me that yesterday. And you would have thought I was crazy. Would you have taken the load?" She had a point. "Did you ever hear about truckers disappearing on that route?" I asked. "Back in the 80s and 90s? The silence on the other end was answer enough. "Carol, ancient history," she said. "They changed the route numbers, did some road work. Whatever was happening up there, it's not happening anymore. I was on 226 last night. Same road. Did anything happen to you?" I opened my mouth to tell her everything. The CB voices, the lights in the fog, the abandoned truck, the thing that had chased me. But something stopped me. Maybe the same instinct that had kept me quiet when she'd warned me yesterday. "No," I said. "Nothing happened. Just some heavy fog." "There you go. Like I said, ancient history. Get some rest, Decker. I'll have something for you Monday morning." She hung up before I could ask anything else. I spent the rest of the day in that motel room, digging through archived news articles and trucking forums. The more I searched, the more I found. Not just disappearances, but sightings. Stories from truck drivers who'd seen things on mountain roads they couldn't explain. Most of them were easy to dismiss. Ghost stories, basically. The kind of urban legends that grow up around any stretch of isolated highway. Every region had them. Phantom hitchhikers, mysterious lights, vanishing vehicles. But some of the stories had details that made me uncomfortable. Specifically, the descriptions of what drivers had seen. One post from 2012, on a forum for long-haul truckers, driving through West Virginia last night, somewhere in the mountains. Thick fog, couldn't see shit. Radio started acting weird, picking up some kind of signal I couldn't identify. Then I saw someone on the shoulder, flagging me down. I slowed down, but something felt wrong. The person's arms were too long and they were moving weird, like their joints bent the wrong way. I drove past without stopping. When I checked my mirror, they were gone. Couldn't sleep the rest of that trip. Another post from 2008. Has anyone else experienced weird stuff on Route 226 in WV? I had my CB turn on by itself 3 times last night. Always the same voice saying numbers. Then I saw another truck on the shoulder. Looked abandoned, but when I came back that way an hour later, had to turn around, wrong road, the truck was gone. No way it could have moved that fast. Still, can't explain it. There were dozens more. Some were clearly exaggerated or made up. But there were enough credible-sounding accounts that I couldn't just dismiss them all. The sun was setting when I finally closed my laptop. I'd learned a lot, but none of it made me feel better. If anything, I felt worse, because all the research confirmed what I already knew. Something was wrong with that stretch of road. Something that had been wrong for a long time. I tried to sleep again that night, but it didn't come any easier. I kept thinking about those disappeared truckers. Had they seen what I'd seen? Had they heard that voice on their CB radios? Had they stopped at mile marker 74? And if so, what had happened to them? Around midnight, I gave up and went for a drive. Not far, just around Beckley. I needed to clear my head, needed to see normal streets and normal people and normal things. I was stopped at a red light downtown when I noticed the truck stop across the intersection. It was a small, independent place, not part of any chain. The kind of stop that local truckers used when they didn't want to deal with the crowds at the bigger facilities. On impulse, I pulled in. The parking lot was mostly empty. Just 3 other trucks, all dark and presumably sleeping. But the diner portion was open, lights glowing warm against the night. I went inside. A handful of people sat, scattered at the counter and booths. A couple of truckers nursing coffee, a waitress reading a paperback behind the counter, a state trooper working on a piece of pie. I took a seat at the counter. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a kind smile, brought me coffee without asking. "You eating or just drinking?" she asked. "Just coffee, thanks." She nodded and went back to her book. I sat there for a while, letting the warmth and the normalcy seep into me. This was real. This diner, this coffee, these people. What had happened on Whisper Ridge, that wasn't real, couldn't be real. "You look like you've had a rough one." I looked over. The state trooper had moved from his booth to the stool next to mine. He was younger than I'd thought, maybe early 30s, with the clean-cut look of someone who took his job seriously. "Long haul," I said. "Just got in this morning." "Where from?" "Asheville." He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "That's a rough drive in the dark, especially this time of year with the fog." "You work this area?" I asked. "State Route 226 mostly, that whole stretch through the mountains." He extended his hand. "Trooper Wyatt Tate." I shook his hand. "Decker." "Well, Decker, if you came in from Asheville last night, then you probably know that road better than you want to by now." "You could say that." He studied me for a moment. "Run into anything unusual up there?" The question caught me off guard. The way he asked it wasn't casual. There was weight behind it. "Why do you ask?" Tate shrugged. "We get reports sometimes. Drivers seeing things, experiencing equipment malfunctions. Usually around..." He trailed off, seeming to reconsider what he was about to say. "Around mile marker 74, I finished." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or concern. "You experienced something," he said. It wasn't a question. I told him. Not everything. I left out the thing that had chased me, because saying it out loud would have sounded insane. But I told him about the CB voices, the repeating mile markers, the abandoned truck that vanished. Tate listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. "How long have you been with state police?" I asked. 8 years, 5 of them on that mountain road. "So you know." "I know that stretch of road has more reported incidents than any other in the state," he said carefully. "Equipment failures, disorientation, claims of missing time. We've investigated all of them. And we've never found any evidence of criminal activity or natural phenomena that would explain the reports." He met my eyes. "That doesn't mean nothing's happening. It just means we can't explain what is." "What about the missing truckers?" I asked. "I found articles about 3 disappearances, all near mile 74. Richard Mason in 1987, Dale Archer in 93, Marcus Cole in 2001. Tate's jaw tightened. Those cases are still open, technically, but you don't expect to solve them. No, he said quietly, I don't. Have there been others? More recent ones? He hesitated, then nodded. 2 that I know of, both within the past 5 years. No bodies found, no evidence at the scenes, just empty trucks. Jesus. The department's official position is that these are voluntary disappearances. People wanting to start over, faking their own deaths. It happens. He took another sip of coffee. But I've been up there at night, Decker. I've driven that road maybe 1,000 times, and I can tell you there's something wrong with it. What do you think it is? I don't know. My grandfather used to say the Appalachians are old, older than people. And some places up in those mountains, they're not meant for us. We build roads through them, cut tunnels, put up our signs and lights. But that doesn't change what those places are underneath. That's not very scientific. No, he agreed. It's not. But science hasn't given me a better explanation. The waitress came by with the coffee pot, refilling both our cups. Tate waited until she'd walked away before speaking again. You planning to drive 226 again? He asked. Not if I can help it. Good, because my advice, completely unofficial, just one guy to another, is to stay away from that section of road, especially at night, especially around mile marker 74. I wasn't planning on going back. See that you don't. He stood up, leaving a few bills on the counter. Be safe out there, Decker. He left, and I sat alone at the counter, finishing my coffee. Through the window, I could see his patrol car pulling out of the lot, heading back toward the mountains. I thought about what he'd said, about the mountains being old, about some places not being meant for people. It was the kind of thing you'd expect to hear from some superstitious local, not from a state trooper. But he'd been serious. Completely serious. I paid for my coffee and went back to the motel. This time, exhaustion finally caught up with me, and I slept. No dreams, or at least none that I remembered. I spent the weekend in Beckley, avoiding the mountains and trying to convince myself that I'd overreacted to a stressful drive. By Sunday afternoon, I'd almost succeeded. Then Carol called with a load. Got something good for you, she said. Beckley to Roanoke, furniture. Light load, easy drive. I pulled up the route on my GPS. It was straightforward. I-77 south to I-81, then a straight shot into Roanoke. Main highways the whole way. No mountain back roads, no State Route 226. When do you need me there? I asked. Pickup Monday morning at 8, delivery by 6 p.m. Gives you plenty of cushion. I'll take it. Great, paperwork's in your system. She hung up, and I sat there looking at the route. It was perfect, exactly what I needed. A simple, uneventful drive on major highways to get my confidence back. Monday morning came clear and cold. I picked up the load without incident and was on the road by 8:30. The first few hours were exactly what I'd hoped for. Smooth highway, light traffic, no problems. I made it to Roanoke by 3 p.m., well ahead of schedule. The delivery was at a furniture warehouse on the south side of the city. I pulled in, got unloaded, and was back on the road by 4. That's when Carol called again. Hey Decker, got another one for you if you want it. Roanoke to Bluefield, auto parts, pick up at 5, delivery by midnight. I checked my map. Bluefield was back in West Virginia, about 90 miles from Roanoke. The route would take me... I stopped, felt my stomach drop. The route would take me through the mountains. Not exactly the same road I'd driven before, but close, very close. What route? I asked, already knowing the answer. Highway 460 through the mountains, then catch 19 up to Bluefield. should be about 2 hours, 2.5 with the mountain grades. Highway 460. I pulled it up on my GPS. It ran parallel to State Route 226 for part of its length, about 5 miles to the south. Close enough that I'd be able to see the same mountains, maybe even some of the same terrain, but it wasn't the same road. It wasn't 226. It wasn't Whisper Ridge. "Decker? You there?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm here, I'll take it." "Great. Warehouse is off Airport Road. They're expecting you." I picked up the load and was back on the highway by 5:30. The sun was already low on the horizon, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. I'd be driving through them at night, but not on 226. Not through Whisper Ridge. Highway 460 was a better road than 226, wider, with more guardrails and better lighting in the developed areas. But as I climbed into the mountains, civilization fell away quickly. Within 20 minutes of leaving Roanoke, I was surrounded by forest and ridges with nothing but my headlights to push back the darkness. The sun set around 6:30. By 7, it was full dark. I kept the CB radio off. I didn't want to risk hearing that voice again, even though I was on a different road. The silence in the cab was better than the alternative. The highway climbed steadily, winding through passes and along ridgelines. Traffic was light, just the occasional car or truck passing in the opposite direction. I was making good time, should be in Bluefield by 9:30. Then, around mile marker 38, my GPS went crazy. The screen flickered once, twice, then the route line disappeared. The map began spinning, as if the satellite couldn't figure out which direction I was facing. My little blue dot jumped around the screen randomly. I slapped the unit a couple times, which usually helped with glitches. Nothing. The GPS was completely fried. "God damn it," I muttered. But it was fine. I didn't need GPS for this. Highway 460 was a straight shot through to Bluefield. Just follow the signs, keep going east, couldn't get lost. Except there were no signs. I'd been driving for 10 minutes since the GPS died, and I should have passed at least 2 or 3 highway markers. But the road was empty of signs. No mile markers, no highway shields, nothing. I told myself not to panic. Mountain roads sometimes went long stretches without signage, especially the older sections. And my headlights could easily miss signs that were set back from the road or partially hidden by trees. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The road began to narrow. At first I thought it was just a construction zone, or maybe an older section that hadn't been widened yet. But after another 5 minutes, the pavement itself started to change. It went from smooth asphalt to rougher, older pavement, the kind of road surface that hadn't been resurfaced in years. This wasn't Highway 460. Not anymore. I slowed down, looking for somewhere to turn around. But the road had also gotten more winding, with steep drop-offs on the right and sheer rock faces on the left. No pullouts, no intersections, no safe place to make a U-turn with a loaded semi. I had to keep going forward and hope the road connected back to 460, or at least to some other highway where I could get my bearings. The fog started around mile marker. Wait. There was a mile marker, I'd just passed it. I checked my mirror, but the fog was already too thick to see it clearly. But I could have sworn it said 74. No, that was impossible. Mile 74 was on State Route 226, not on whatever road I was currently on. Different highway, different numbering system. But as I drove, I started recognizing things. The shape of the ridgeline on my right, visible in brief gaps in the fog. The particular curve of a switchback, a rock formation that looked like a face in profile. I'd been here before. Somehow, I was back on Whisper Ridge. My heart was pounding now, hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I wanted to stop, to turn around, to do anything except keep driving deeper into this nightmare. But there was nowhere to stop. The road was barely wide enough for my truck, with no shoulder to speak of, so I kept going. What other choice did I have? The CB radio turned itself on. I hadn't touched it. The power cord was still unplugged, the unit completely disconnected from my truck's electrical system. But the green light came on anyway, and the static began. "No," I said out loud. "No, not again." The static resolved into that voice. The flat, mechanical tone that I'd heard before. 74. I grabbed the CB unit and yanked it completely out of its mount, ripping the bracket screws out of the dashboard. I threw it onto the floor of the passenger side, where it lay crackling with static. 74, 74, 74. The voice was coming from the unit on the floor, but also from somewhere else, from behind me, from the sleeper. "I'm not stopping," I said, to the voice, to the road, to whatever was happening. "I'm not stopping. I'm just going to drive until I'm out of these mountains." The voice changed then. It wasn't that flat, mechanical tone anymore. It was human, desperate. Multiple voices overlapping. "Don't stop. Turn back. Get off the road. It's in the fog. Mile 74. Run." I pressed down on the gas, my truck accelerating as much as it could on the upgrade. The voices kept coming from the radio on the floor, a cacophony of warnings and pleas. Then I saw the lights. The same yellow lights from before appearing in my mirrors. First on the left, then on the right, then both. They paced my truck, appearing and disappearing in the fog. I looked at my speedometer. I was doing 65 on a road that should have been maxed out at 45, my truck screaming as I pushed it harder than I should on these mountain curves. But the lights kept pace. Then I saw it ahead. Another truck parked on the shoulder. Dark green Freightliner, same as before. Hazard lights blinking, engine running. "No," I said. "No, I'm not stopping. I'm not doing this again." But as I got closer, I could see someone in the road, waving their arms. Flagging me down, I wasn't stopping. I didn't care if they were hurt, if they needed help, if they were in genuine distress. I'd been down this road before, literally and figuratively. I knew what happened when you stopped, but as I got closer I could make out details. The person in the road wasn't standing right. Their posture was wrong, tilted at an unnatural angle. And their arms, waving to flag me down, were too long. Joints bending in ways human joints shouldn't bend. I swerved around them, my trailer swinging wide. In my mirror, I saw the figure turn to follow my movement, and for just a second, my headlights illuminated its face. Except it didn't have a face. Just smooth, wet skin where features should have been. I drove faster, the truck protesting as I pushed it past safe speeds for these conditions. The voices on the radio got louder, more frantic. 74, 74, 74. The fog got thicker, reducing visibility to almost nothing. I was driving blind, trusting that the road would be where I expected it to be, that I wouldn't hit a broken-down car or a fallen tree or another one of those things. Then, through the fog, I saw something that made me hit the brakes. There was writing on the road, not painted, carved. Deep grooves in the asphalt, forming letters that were each 3 feet tall. Turn back. I stopped. I couldn't help it. My truck sat idling in the middle of the road, my headlights illuminating those carved words. Behind the first message there was more. Mile 74. They come in the fog. Don't let them touch you. The words extended up the road as far as I could see into the fog. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. The lights appeared around my truck now, not in the mirror but outside, surrounding me. Yellow points of illumination in the fog, bobbing and weaving like they were carried by things that were walking. The voices on the radio reached a crescendo, all of them screaming the same thing. Run, run. Run, run, run. I put the truck in gear and drove, right over the words carved in the road, feeling the thump, thump, thump as my wheels crossed each letter. The lights followed, keeping pace no matter how fast I went. Something hit the side of my trailer, a wet, meaty thump that reverberated through the whole truck. Then another, then several at once, like multiple objects slamming into the trailer walls. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't want to see. The road began to descend. I was going downhill now, gravity helping my truck pick up speed. The fog started to clear slightly and I could see farther ahead. There was a bridge coming up. Old stone construction, single lane, probably built 100 years ago and never upgraded. Under normal circumstances, I would have slowed to a crawl to cross it safely. But these weren't normal circumstances. I hit the bridge at 70 miles per hour, feeling the old stones groan under my truck's weight. The whole structure shook. I was certain it would collapse, that I'd plunge into whatever ravine or river it was spanning. But the bridge held, and when I came off the other side, the fog was gone. Just like that. 1 second I was driving through the thickest fog I'd ever seen, and the next I was on a clear mountain road under a sky full of stars. No fog, no lights following me, no voices on the radio. I looked in my mirrors. The bridge was still visible behind me, old stone arches spanning a deep gorge. But the fog stopped at the bridge, as if hitting an invisible wall. Beyond it, I could see those yellow lights, dozens of them, clustered at the far end of the bridge but not crossing. I kept driving, not slowing down until I'd put 5 miles between me and that bridge. When I finally eased off the gas, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. I pulled into the first pullout I found and sat there, engine idling, trying to get my breathing under control. My whole body was shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting me hard. I checked the time. 9:15 p.m. I'd been driving for less than 4 hours total, but it felt like days. My phone rang. Carol. "Hey, Decker, just checking in. You making good time?" "Where am I?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What do you mean? You should be on 460, maybe 30 miles out of Bluefield." I looked at my GPS. It had rebooted itself and was showing my position. According to the map, I was exactly where Carol said I should be, on Highway 460, approaching Bluefield. But that was impossible. I'd been on a different road. I'd seen mile marker 74. I'd been back on Whisper Ridge. "Decker, you there?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm here. I'm fine. Just had some GPS trouble." "Well, you're making good time. Should have you in Bluefield by 10. "Right, yeah. I'll call you when I deliver." I hung up and sat there, staring at the GPS. It showed Highway 460. It showed I'd never left Highway 460. According to my truck's electronic log, I'd been driving a steady 60 miles per hour for the past 3 hours. No stops, no deviations. But I had deviated. I'd been somewhere else. I'd seen things. I got out of the truck to check the trailer. In the light of my flashlight, I could see them. Dozens of wet handprints on the trailer walls. Some were human-sized, some were much larger. All of them had too many fingers. I stood there, staring at those prints, and for the first time in my adult life, I considered just walking away, leaving the truck, the load, the whole career behind. Calling a taxi to take me to the nearest airport and flying somewhere, anywhere that wasn't these mountains. But I didn't. Because truck drivers don't quit. We finished the job. I got back in my cab and drove to Bluefield. Made my delivery. Signed the paperwork. Did everything exactly as I was supposed to do. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that something had touched my truck on that road. Something that shouldn't exist had left its marks on my trailer. And somewhere in these mountains, there was a mile marker with the number 74, and something terrible waited there in the fog. I took a week off after the Bluefield run. Told Carol I needed to deal with some personal stuff, which wasn't entirely a lie. What I was really dealing with was the question of whether I could keep doing this job. I'd been a trucker for 11 years. It was all I knew how to do. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those lights in the fog, heard those voices on the radio, felt the truck shudder as something hit the trailer. The handprints on the trailer wouldn't wash off. I tried everything: soap, degreaser, even paint thinner. They were burned into the metal somehow, permanent marks of something that shouldn't have been able to touch my truck. Eventually, I just painted over them. 3 coats of industrial gray paint, the same color as the rest of the trailer. You couldn't see the handprints anymore, but I knew they were there underneath. I could feel them, especially at night. On the 6th day of my break, I drove back to Beckley, not for a load. I needed to talk to Trooper Tate. I found him at the same truck stop where we'd met before, sitting at the counter with a cup of coffee and a piece of pie. He saw me come in and nodded to the stool next to him. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said. "Neither did I." I told him everything. About the second trip, the GPS malfunction, ending up back on Whisper Ridge even though I'd been on Highway 460. The lights, the voices, the bridge, the handprints. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Show me," he finally said. We went out to my truck. I showed him the trailer, pointed to where the handprints had been before I painted over them. He ran his hand over the paint, then pulled out a small flashlight and examined the surface closely. "You can see them," he said. "The paint's a different texture where the prints were, like something burned through the metal before you covered it." "What is it?" I asked. "What's happening on that road?" Tate put his flashlight away and leaned against my truck. "My grandfather told me a story once. He was a trucker too, drove these mountains back in the 50s and 60s. He said there were places in the Appalachians where the ground was thin. Thin? Between here and somewhere else. He said the Cherokee knew about these places, avoided them. But when we came through building roads, we didn't know any better. We paved right over them. That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not, because I don't have an answer. All I know is that something happens on that stretch of road, around mile 74. It's been happening for at least 40 years, probably longer, and 5 truckers that I know of have disappeared there." "6, I said. "I found one more in the archives, 1982. He nodded, not surprised. "Could be more we don't know about. Some disappearances don't get reported. Drifters, people with no family, drivers working off the books. What happened to them? I don't know. Their trucks were found running, doors open, no sign of struggle. Just gone." He looked at me. "You're lucky, Decker. You got away. Twice. Most people don't get a second chance. I wasn't on Whisper Ridge the second time. I was on 460. "Were you?" he asked. "Or did 460 become Whisper Ridge for a while? These mountains. They shift, not physically but in other ways. The boundaries between places aren't as solid as we like to think." I didn't know what to say to that. It sounded insane. But I'd seen things that were more insane. "What do I do?" I asked. "Stay away from that area. Request routes that don't go through these mountains. And if you ever find yourself on Whisper Ridge again, if you see that mile marker..." He stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Don't stop. No matter what you see, no matter what you hear, just keep driving until you're clear." "And if I can't get clear?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew what happened to drivers who couldn't get clear. I left Beckley that afternoon and drove back to Bristol. Took the long way, staying on major interstates the whole time. added 3 hours to the trip, but I didn't care. When I got home, I called Carol. "I need you to keep me off mountain routes," I said. "Appalachian region, any of them." "That's going to limit your options," she said. "A lot of freight moves through those mountains." "I don't care. Find me flatland routes, Midwest, plains, desert, I don't care where, as long as it's not mountains." There was a pause. "You're serious about this?" "Completely serious." "All right," she said. "I'll see what I can do. But Decker, if you want to tell me what happened." "I don't," I said. "Thanks, Carol." For the next month, I ran routes through Kansas, Nebraska, the Dakotas. Flat country, straight roads, nothing but cornfields and wheat fields stretching to the horizon. It was boring, which was exactly what I needed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out of those mountains. Sometimes, late at night when I was parked at a truck stop, I'd hear sounds outside my cab. Wet footsteps on asphalt. Breathing that didn't sound quite human. And once, I woke up to find a handprint on my windshield. Too large, and with too many fingers. I wiped it away and told myself it was nothing. Condensation, a weird reflection. Something normal that my tired brain had misinterpreted. But I knew better. Whatever was on Whisper Ridge, whatever waited at mile marker 74, it had touched my truck. And sometimes, on the darkest nights, I think part of it is still touching me. I still drive trucks. It's all I know how to do, but I keep to the flat places now, the open spaces where you can see for miles in every direction. And I never, ever take loads that go through the Appalachians. Because I know that if I go back to those mountains, if I find myself on that road again, I might not make it out a third time. Sometimes Carol calls me with loads through West Virginia or Tennessee. Good money, easy routes. And every time I turn them down. She doesn't ask why anymore. Maybe she knows. Maybe she always knew. Last week, I was scrolling through a trucking forum and saw a post that made my blood run cold. It was from a driver asking if anyone else had experienced weird stuff on State Route 266 in West Virginia, near mile marker 74. He described lights in the fog, voices on his CB, an abandoned truck that vanished. I started to reply, to warn him to stay away from that road. But I stopped, because what would I say? That there's something in those mountains that defies explanation. That the laws of nature seem to break down around mile marker 74. That trucks and drivers disappear and are never found. He wouldn't believe me. No one would. I barely believe it myself, and I lived through it. So I closed the forum without posting and went back to studying my maps, planning my next route. Somewhere flat, somewhere far from the mountains. But late at night, when I'm lying in my sleeper and the world is dark and quiet, I sometimes hear it. That voice. That flat, mechanical voice that came through my CB radio. 74. It's quieter now, distant. But it's always there, at the edge of hearing. A reminder of something I saw but can't explain. Something I survived but don't understand. I tell myself it's just memory, just trauma playing tricks on my mind. The same way I tell myself that the handprints I painted over are just discoloration in the metal, that the sounds I hear outside my truck at night are just animals or the wind. But sometimes, when I check my mirrors, I see lights in the distance. Yellow lights that follow me for a while before fading away. And I wonder if whatever lives on Whisper Ridge is still watching me, still waiting for me to come back. I won't, though. I can't. Because I've learned something in my 11 years on these roads. The mountains are old, and they keep their secrets. And some places, some roads, some mile markers, they're not meant for us. We drive through them because we need to get somewhere, because there's freight to deliver and miles to cover. But the mountains don't care about our needs. They were here long before the roads, and they'll be here long after the roads are gone. And in the deep places, where the fog never quite clears and the CB radio picks up signals from nowhere, something waits. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it wants. All I know is that it touched my truck, and sometimes, late at night in the dark, I can still feel it touching me. Mile marker 74. Whisper Ridge. If you ever find yourself there, in the fog, with your radio crackling to life, don't stop. Just keep driving. And pray that you can find your way out before the mountains decide to keep you. 3 months after everything happened, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, there was only static on the line. That familiar crackling, like a CB radio searching for a signal. I was about to hang up when I heard it, underneath the static. So quiet, I almost missed it. A voice, flat and mechanical. 74. I haven't answered calls from unknown numbers since, but sometimes my phone rings late at night. Always a different number. Always the same static. Always the same voice. I'm thinking about changing careers, maybe working in a warehouse, or driving for a local delivery company. Something that doesn't involve long hauls through the dark. Because I can't shake the feeling that whatever is on Whisper Ridge is trying to call me back. And one of these nights I'm afraid I might answer. I've hauled freight through every state east of the Mississippi, but I'd never driven the old mining roads in southern West Virginia until that night in November. 23 years behind the wheel, and I thought I'd seen every kind of road the Appalachians had to offer. I was wrong. My name's Wyatt Sloan, and I drive for a mid-sized outfit out of Roanoke. We do a lot of industrial equipment, mining gear, construction machinery, that sort of thing. Heavy loads, specialized routes, the kind of work that pays well because nobody else wants to do it. The call came in on a Thursday afternoon. I was finishing up a delivery in Charleston when my dispatcher, a guy named Roy Maddox, rang my cell. "Got something urgent for you," he said without preamble. Roy wasn't one for small talk. Fabricated steel parts. Needs to get from Charleston to a mining operation outside of Logan by morning. I pulled up my mental map of the area. Logan was maybe 60 miles south, mostly highway. Easy run, even with a heavy load. "What's the catch?" I asked. "No catch. Straight shot down Route 119. You'll be there by midnight, plenty of time. What's it paying?" He quoted me a number that was about 30% higher than normal. That got my attention. "Why the premium?" I asked. "Client's desperate. They've got equipment down, losing money by the hour. You deliver tonight, they'll have their maintenance crew on it by dawn." I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds. The money was good, the route was simple, and I had nothing else on my schedule. "I'm in," I said. "Great. Pickups at the fabrication plant on Corridor G. They're loading now." I made it to the plant by 5 p.m. The place was a sprawling industrial complex, all corrugated metal and sodium vapor lights. A foreman named Briggs met me at the gate, a clipboard in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other. "You're Sloan?" he asked. "That's me." "Good. We've got your load ready, 7,500 pounds of steel components, secured and tarped." He walked me through the paperwork while his crew finished loading. The parts were large, gear housings, support brackets, things machined to precise tolerances. They'd packed everything carefully, wrapped in protective material and strapped down tight. "Weather's supposed to be clear tonight," Briggs said as I signed off on the manifest. "Shouldn't give you any trouble." I thanked him and climbed into my cab. My truck was a 2018 Kenworth T680, white with blue stripes. I'd bought it new, and it had been reliable as sunrise. The engine purred when I started it up, and all my gauges showed green. I pulled out of the plant at 5:45. Rush hour was winding down, and traffic on the highway was light. The sun was setting behind the western ridges, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. It would be full dark in another hour. Route 119 south out of Charleston is a good road. 4 lanes for the first 20 miles, then it narrows to 2 as you get into the mountains. But it's well maintained, with good sight lines and regular maintenance. I'd driven worse roads in better weather. The first hour was easy. I made good time, keeping my speed steady at 60 where the road allowed it, slowing for the curves when it didn't. My CB was quiet. Not many trucks on this route on a Thursday night. I had the radio tuned to a classic country station, and they were playing all the old stuff. Hank Williams, Patsy Cline, George Jones. Around 7:30, I saw the first sign for Logan. 35 miles. I was making better time than I'd expected. At this rate, I'd be there by 9, way ahead of schedule. That's when I saw the road construction sign. It was a digital board, the kind they use for temporary alerts. Orange letters on a black background. Route 119 closed ahead. Detour at exit 12. Follow posted signs. I checked my GPS. Exit 12 was about 5 miles ahead. The detour would probably add some time to the trip, but I'd still make my delivery window easily. The exit came up right where it was supposed to. There was a state trooper parked at the top of the ramp, lights flashing. I rolled down my window as I passed him. "Detour," I called out. He nodded and pointed to a temporary sign. "Follow County Road 14 south. It'll loop you back to 119 in about 15 miles. Road's good, shouldn't give you any trouble." What happened on 119? Rock slide. Took out both lanes about 10 miles down. Cleanup crew's working on it, but it'll be closed till tomorrow afternoon at least. I thanked him and followed the detour signs onto County Road 14. It was a smaller road than 119, just 2 lanes, but the pavement looked decent. The signs were clear, those temporary orange arrows that road crews put up, reflective and easy to spot. For the first few miles, everything was fine. The road wound through a valley, following a creek. I could see houses here and there, porch lights glowing in the darkness. A few cars passed going the other way. Normal traffic for a rural county road. Then the houses stopped. It wasn't gradual. One minute I was passing a cluster of homes, and the next I was in deep forest. The road started to climb, switchbacks getting tighter. My truck downshifted as it pulled the grade. I checked my GPS. The screen showed County Road 14, a thin gray line winding through green space marked with topographic lines. According to the map, I should hit the junction with Route 119 in about 8 miles. But the detour signs had stopped. I'd been following those orange arrows every few hundred yards, each one pointing me forward. But I hadn't seen one in at least 5 minutes. I slowed down, looking for the next sign. Nothing. The road split ahead. Left or right, no indication which way to go. No detour arrows, no route markers, nothing. I stopped at the intersection and put my truck in neutral. This didn't make sense. Road crews didn't just stop marking a detour halfway through. There should have been signs at every turn. I pulled out my phone to call Roy, but there was no signal. Not even one bar. I wasn't surprised. These mountains were notorious for dead zones, but it was frustrating. I looked at my GPS again. The little blue dot showing my position sat squarely on County Road 14. But the intersection I was sitting at didn't appear on the map. According to the GPS, the road went straight ahead. No split, no decision to make. I sat there for a minute trying to decide. The logical choice was to go left. That direction seemed to curve back east, toward where Route 119 should be. The right fork headed deeper into the mountains. I put the truck in gear and took the left fork. The road got worse almost immediately. The pavement was older, more cracked. Potholes forced me to slow to a crawl in places. The forest pressed in close on both sides, branches overhanging the road and scraping against my trailer as I passed. I'd been driving for maybe 10 minutes when I realized something was wrong. The road was climbing, steeply, but according to my GPS, I should have been descending into the valley where Route 119 ran. Instead, I was going up. I checked the GPS again. The blue dot was still on County Road 14, still moving in the right direction. But the terrain on the screen didn't match what I was seeing through my windshield. Then I saw it, a switchback ahead, a tight hairpin turn to the left. But that wasn't the strange part. What made me slow down was that I didn't remember this switchback being on the map. I'd looked at the route before taking the left fork, and there hadn't been any major curves shown. I navigated the turn carefully, my trailer swinging wide. When I came out of it, I was facing a direction that felt wrong, like I'd turned too far, more than 90 degrees. The road ahead looked familiar. Too familiar. I kept driving, but a feeling of unease was building in my chest. Something about this stretch of road seemed like I'd seen it before. The shape of the guardrail, the particular lean of a dead tree on the left side, the way the road surface was patched in one spot. I'd been on this section of road already. That was impossible. I'd been driving forward the whole time, taking that left fork, and then following the road up. There was no way I could have looped back to a place I'd already been. But there was the tree, the exact same dead tree, leaning at the exact same angle. I stopped the truck and sat there, engine idling. My hands were gripping the wheel tight enough that my knuckles had gone white. This didn't make sense. Roads didn't loop back on themselves like this, not without intersections or junctions. And I would have seen another road if I'd crossed one. I put the truck in park and got out. The night air was cold, and I could see my breath. The forest was absolutely silent. No wind, no animals, nothing. Just the idle of my engine and the sound of my own breathing. I walked back along the road, maybe 50 yards. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see my tire tracks in the dust and dirt on the shoulder. Fresh tracks from just minutes ago when I'd come through here. But there were also older tracks, wider apart, deeper, like they'd been made hours ago, not minutes. My own tracks, from when I'd driven this section the first time. I was standing in a place I'd already been, even though I'd never turned around. I went back to my truck and climbed in. My hands were shaking now, and it wasn't from the cold. I grabbed my thermos of coffee and took a long drink, trying to calm my nerves. There had to be a rational explanation. Maybe I'd gotten disoriented, taken a wrong turn without realizing it. Maybe the GPS was glitching and showing me in the wrong place. Maybe I was more tired than I thought, and my memory was playing tricks. I pulled up the navigation again and plotted a route back to Route 119 using a different road. The GPS showed several options, all of them heading east. I picked the most direct one and put the truck in gear. I would backtrack to the last intersection, take the right fork this time, and find my way back to the highway. Simple. I drove back the way I'd come, watching for the intersection. The GPS said it should be about 2 miles back, but when I got there, there was no intersection. The road just continued, winding through the forest. No fork, no junction, nothing. Like the split I'd encountered earlier had never existed. I stopped again, checked the GPS. According to the map, I was on County Road 14, heading north. But I'd just driven south. I should have passed that intersection, unless it wasn't there anymore. I sat there for a long time, maybe 5 minutes, trying to process what was happening. Roads didn't appear and disappear. Intersections didn't vanish. This wasn't possible. But I also couldn't deny what I was seeing, or rather, what I wasn't seeing. I made a decision. I'd keep driving forward, following the road wherever it led. Eventually, it had to connect to something. Another county road, a state highway, a town. I'd find a place with cell service, call Roy, and let him know I'd need help getting to the delivery site. The company would probably be pissed, but that was better than driving in circles all night on roads that didn't make sense. I drove for another hour. The road climbed and descended, wound through switchbacks and straight sections. Sometimes I'd pass through tunnels, old stone construction probably built when this road was a main route. Other times I'd cross bridges over deep gorges, narrow spans that made me nervous even though they seemed solid enough. But I didn't see another car, didn't pass any houses or buildings, didn't find any intersections, just the road, endlessly winding through the mountains. Around 9:30, I saw lights ahead. Civilization, finally. I accelerated slightly, eager to reach whatever town or building it was. As I got closer, I realized the lights were stationary. Not a town, but a single structure. A building right on the side of the road. It was a gas station, or it had been once. The place looked abandoned. Pumps dark, windows boarded up. But there were lights on inside, visible through gaps in the boards. I pulled into the lot and stopped. Killed the engine. Sat there for a moment, debating whether to get out. The smart thing would be to keep driving. Abandoned gas stations in the middle of nowhere weren't the kind of place you wanted to stop, especially alone at night. But I needed to know where I was. Needed to find a map or a phone, or another person who could tell me how to get back to Route 119. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from the cab. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds. There were no other vehicles around. The gas pumps were ancient, the kind with mechanical dials instead of digital displays. They'd probably been out of service for 20 years. I walked toward the building. As I got closer, I could hear something. A rhythmic sound, mechanical, like a generator running. The door was locked, but one of the boarded windows had a gap wide enough to see through. I peered inside. The interior looked like it had been frozen in time. Shelves still stocked with merchandise, canned goods, basic supplies. A counter with an old cash register. Everything covered in a thick layer of dust. But the lights were on. Fluorescent tubes flickering on the ceiling, casting harsh white light over everything. "Hello?" I called out, knocking on the door. "Anyone here?" No answer. I tried the door handle again. Still locked. I was about to turn back to my truck when I noticed something on the door. A piece of paper, yellowed and curling at the edges. Handwritten text, faded but still legible. Road closed, turn back, this is not the way. Below that, in different handwriting, I tried to turn back, the road brought me here again. If you're reading this, you're already lost. And below that, dozens of other messages. Different handwriting, different pens. Some fresh, some so old they were barely visible. Mile markers lie. The switchback loops forever. Count your turns. Don't trust the GPS. I've been here 3 times tonight. I stepped back from the door, my heart pounding. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. I ran back to my truck and climbed in, started the engine. I didn't care where the road went anymore, I just needed to get away from this place. I pulled back onto the road and accelerated. The gas station's lights disappeared behind me as I rounded a curve. 5 minutes later, I saw the switchback. The same switchback from before. The tight hairpin turn to the left, with the dead tree leaning at that same angle. I'd come back to the same place again. This time, I didn't stop. I took the turn and kept driving, watching the odometer. I wanted to see how far I'd go before I ended up back here again. 3.2 miles. That's how far it took. 3.2 miles of driving, and I was right back at the same switchback, approaching from the same direction. I'd made a complete loop without turning around. I stopped the truck and put it in park, turned off the engine, sat there in the sudden silence trying to think. This wasn't possible. Roads didn't work this way. There had to be an explanation, some trick of the terrain, some optical illusion that made it seem like I was in the same place when I wasn't. But the dead tree was right there, the same tree, and my tire tracks in the dirt were fresher now, overlapping with the older ones. I'd been here 3 times, and if I kept driving, I'd be back here again. I grabbed my logbook and a pen, started making notes. If I couldn't trust my memory or the GPS, I'd keep a written record. Document everything. Look for patterns. Entry 1, 10:47 p.m. At switchback for 3rd time. Odometer shows 3.2 miles between loops. Tire tracks confirm I've been here before. I put the truck in gear and drove again. This time, I watched everything carefully. Every curve, every landmark, every change in the road surface. Looking for where the loop happened, where the road somehow bent back on itself. But I couldn't find it. The road seemed to go straight ahead the whole time, descending into a valley and then climbing back up. No hidden turns, no impossible curves. Yet, 3.2 miles later, I was back at the switchback. Entry 2, 11:03 p.m. 4th loop, exact same distance. Road appears straight, but must be turning somehow. GPS still shows me on County Road 14, but map doesn't match terrain. I kept driving, kept looping. Each time I took notes, trying to find something different, some change that would tell me what was happening. Entry 3, 11:19 p.m., 5th loop. Past gas station again. Same lights on. No change. Entry 4, 11:35 p.m., 6th loop. Sky looks wrong. Stars in different positions than they should be. Entry 5, 11:51 p.m., 7th loop. Odometer shows 22.4 miles since first loop. Should be way past Logan by now. Should have hit Route 109 or another road. Nothing but this loop. I was starting to panic. The rational part of my brain that had carried me through 23 years of driving was screaming that this couldn't be happening. But I couldn't deny the evidence. Couldn't explain away the repeating landmarks, the fresh tire tracks over old ones, the written records in my logbook. I was trapped in a loop. A section of road that somehow connected back to itself, defying geometry and logic and everything I knew about how the world worked. On the 8th loop, I tried something different. Instead of taking the switchback, I stopped just before it. Got out with my flashlight and walked forward on foot, leaving my truck idling behind me. I walked through the switchback, around the curve, following the road. After about 100 yards, I looked back. My truck wasn't there. The road behind me was empty. No truck, no lights, nothing. Just dark pavement stretching back into the forest. I ran back, my boots pounding on the asphalt, rounded the curve, and there was my truck, right where I'd left it, engine still running. But I'd walked away from it. I'd been farther up the road, and when I looked back, it had been gone. I climbed back into the cab, my breath coming in short gasps. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. This wasn't natural. This wasn't a GPS error or disorientation or fatigue. Something was fundamentally wrong with this road. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. Tried the CB radio. Nothing but static. I was completely alone, trapped in a loop that shouldn't exist, with no way to call for help. Entry 6, 12:07 a.m. Walked ahead on foot. Truck disappeared from view even though I was only 100 yards away. Road is doing something impossible. I sat there for a long time, trying to decide what to do. I could keep driving, keep looping, hoping that eventually something would change. Or I could stop, wait for daylight, see if things made more sense in the morning. Neither option felt right. Finally, I made a decision. I'd try one more thing. I'd drive the loop again, but this time I'd watch my compass. Not the GPS compass, that was clearly lying to me, but my actual magnetic compass, the old one I kept mounted on my dash. If the road was really looping back on itself, the compass would show it. I'd see myself turning, even if it didn't feel like I was turning. I started driving, eyes flicking between the road and the compass needle. North. The needle pointed north, steady. I drove through a curve. The needle swung west slightly, then back to north as the road straightened. Normal behavior for a curving road. Another curve. The needle moved east, then back to north. I descended into the valley, north the whole way. Climbed back up the far side, still north. And then I saw the switchback ahead, the one I'd been approaching for the 9th time. But the compass still said I was heading north. I took the switchback, feeling my truck swing through the hairpin turn, a 90-degree turn to the left, which should have put me heading west. But the compass needle didn't move. It stayed pointing north, as if I'd driven straight ahead. Entry 7, 12:23 a.m. Compass shows north through entire loop, including switchback. Direction isn't changing. Something wrong with space itself, not just the road. I stopped the truck after completing the 9th loop, turned off the engine, sat in the dark cab, listening to my own heartbeat. The road wasn't looping. The road was going straight ahead, exactly like it appeared to be, but somehow I kept ending up back at the same place. Space wasn't working right here. Distance and direction had become meaningless. I could drive forward for 3.2 miles and end up exactly where I started, without ever turning around. I didn't know how that was possible. I didn't know what would make space behave that way. All I knew was that I was trapped, and the night was only getting darker. I've always been a logical person. 23 years on the road teaches you to think practically, to solve problems with common sense and mechanical knowledge. But logic wasn't helping me here. Logic had no explanation for a road that looped back on itself without turning. After the 9th loop, I sat in my truck and tried to think clearly. Panic wouldn't help. Neither would denial. I needed to treat this like any other problem, gather information, look for patterns, find a solution. I pulled out my logbook and reviewed the notes I'd made. Every loop had taken exactly 3.2 miles, measured on my odometer. The landmarks were identical each time: the switchback, the dead tree, the gas station. My compass insisted I was traveling north the whole way, even through turns that should have changed my direction. Something occurred to me. I pulled out my phone and checked the time: 12:31 a.m. My delivery was supposed to be made by morning. Roy would start calling around 5 or 6 a.m. when I didn't show up. But there was no cell signal here, so he'd get no answer. Eventually, he'd call the state police, report me missing. But how would anyone find me? My GPS showed I was on County Road 14, but I clearly wasn't. Not anymore. I was somewhere else. Somewhere that didn't follow normal rules. I started the engine again. Sitting here wouldn't solve anything. I'd drive the loop one more time, but this time I'd try something different. I'd look for a way off this road, any kind of trail, driveway, logging road. Something that led away from this loop. I put the truck in gear and headed into the 10th circuit. The first mile was the descent into the valley. I watched the shoulder carefully, playing my spotlight across the forest. Dense trees, thick underbrush. No breaks, no trails. At the bottom of the valley, the road crossed a bridge. I'd noticed it before, but hadn't paid much attention. This time I stopped. It was an old stone bridge, narrow and arched, the kind built by hand a century ago. A small creek ran beneath it, maybe 10 feet wide. I could hear the water moving over rocks. I got out and walked to the edge of the bridge, shined my flashlight down into the water. It was clear and shallow, flowing from my right to my left, east to west, if I trusted my compass. Something about the creek bothered me, but I couldn't figure out what. I stood there for a minute, watching the water flow, trying to identify what felt wrong. Then it hit me. I'd crossed this bridge 9 times already, each time approaching from the same direction, from the north. And each time the water had been flowing the same way, left to right, as I looked at it from the bridge. But now it was flowing the opposite direction. I walked to the other side of the bridge and looked down again. The water was definitely flowing from my right to my left now, which meant west to east. It had reversed direction. I went back to my truck and made a note in my logbook. Entry 8:12:44 a.m. Bridge at Valley Bottom. Water flow reversed from previous loops. Creek now flowing west to east instead of east to west. I got back on the road and continued driving. The climb up from the valley was steep, and my truck downshifted twice. I kept my spotlight on the shoulder, still looking for any way off this road. Nothing. Just forest and rock face. I passed the gas station again. Same boarded windows, same lights on inside. The door with its collection of written messages. On impulse, I stopped, got out with a pen and walked to the door. The messages from before were still there, but now there were new ones, written in different hands with different pens. This is my 12th loop. Time is wrong here. The bridge changes. I hear voices in the static. That last one made me pause. I hadn't tried my CB radio in a while. I'd gotten nothing but static earlier, but maybe something had changed. I went back to my truck and turned on the CB. Adjusted the squelch, scanned through the channels. Static on every channel. The familiar hiss and crackle of empty airwaves. I was about to turn it off when I heard something. Just for a second. Buried in the static. A voice. Or something like a voice. I fine-tuned the frequency, trying to isolate it. There, channel 19. Underneath the static, something was speaking. Not words exactly, more like numbers. 3.2, 3.2, 3.2, the same distance as each loop. I grabbed the microphone. "This is Wyatt Sloan. Anyone reading me?" The static swallowed my voice. The number voice continued, unchanging. 3.2, 3.2. "If anyone can hear me, I'm stuck on County Road 14, somewhere south of Charleston. My GPS isn't working. I need..." The static changed pitch, got louder, and underneath it I could hear other voices now. Multiple voices, overlapping, all saying different things. Turn count. Direction lies. Space folds here. Count the loops. You're in the bend. I released the microphone. The voices faded back into static, but I could still hear them if I listened carefully. Like they were very far away, or filtered through layers of interference. Entry 9, 1:03 a.m. CB, picking up voices and static. They mention loops and counting. Other people have been here, or something else speaking? I turned off the CB and sat there, thinking about what I'd heard. "Count the loops," one voice had said. I'd completed 10 so far. Was there a significance to the number? Would something change after a certain count? I decided to keep going. Keep driving, keep counting. Look for any change, any difference that might indicate a way out of this trap. Loop 11. The dead tree at the switchback looked slightly different. The angle was wrong, not by much, just a few degrees. I stopped and got out to look at it more carefully. It was definitely the same tree. Same broken branches, same pale dead wood, but it was leaning more to the left than it had been before, like something had pushed it. I walked around it, examining the base. The ground was disturbed, fresh dirt exposed, like the tree had moved recently. But trees don't move on their own. Entry 10, 1:21 a.m. Dead tree has shifted position, leaning further left. Ground disturbed at base. Everything else appears same. Loop 12. The sky was wrong now. I'd noticed it earlier, but now it was unmistakable. The stars weren't in the right positions. The constellation patterns were distorted, stretched out like they'd been pulled taffy, and there were more stars than there should be. The sky was packed with them, so many that they blurred together in places, like clouds of light. Entry 11, 1:37 a.m. Sky continues to distort. Star positions impossible. Either Earth's position has changed or the stars have moved. Neither makes sense. Loop 13. I drove past the gas station without stopping, but as I passed, I saw something in my mirror that made me hit the brakes. The lights inside had been on every time I'd passed before, but this time they'd gone off just as I drove by. Like someone had flipped a switch. I put the truck in reverse and backed up slowly. The gas station came back into view in my mirrors. The lights were on again. I stopped, put the truck in drive, moved forward past the gas station. In my mirrors, the lights went off. I reversed again. The lights came back on. Forward, lights off, reverse, lights on. The lights were responding to my position, or my direction. They were only on when I was approaching the station, not when I was leaving it. Entry 12, 1:55 a.m. Gas station lights respond to direction of travel. On when approaching, off when leaving. Building aware of movement, or some kind of automatic trigger. I got out and walked back to the gas station door, leaving my truck idling up the road. The lights were on, visible through the gaps in the boarded windows. The collection of messages on the door had grown again. New writing appeared at the bottom. The lights are watching. Don't trust what you see. This is Loop 13. That last one made me freeze. This is Loop 13, written in fresh ink like someone had just added it moments ago. But I was alone. There was no one else here. I looked at the handwriting. It was shaky, uneven. Written by someone stressed or frightened, it looked like my handwriting. I pulled out my pen and held it next to the message. The ink color matched, same pen, but I hadn't written it. I'd been in my truck the whole time, hadn't approached the door until just now. I stepped back from the building, my heart pounding. This was wrong on a level I couldn't articulate. Not just the looping road or the distorted stars, this was something more fundamental. I ran back to my truck and kept driving. Loop 14, the bridge at the bottom of the valley. I stopped again, got out to check the water flow. The creek was gone. Not dry, gone. The stream bed was there, rock and gravel, but no water, like someone had turned off a faucet. I climbed down the embankment to get a better look. The rocks were damp, like water had been running over them recently. But now there was nothing, just an empty channel. I walked upstream, following the dry creek bed. After about 50 yards, I found where the water stopped, or started. It was hard to tell which. There was water flowing in the creek, but only up to a certain point. Past that point, the channel was dry. The water just ended. Not like it was being absorbed or diverted. It simply ceased to exist at a specific location, as if hitting an invisible barrier. I reached out and touched the water. It was real, cold, and flowing, but when I tried to scoop some up and move it past the barrier point, it disappeared from my hands, like it had never been there. Entry 13, 2:18 a.m. Creek has vanished. Water only flows in certain section, stops at invisible boundary. Can't move water past that point. Laws of physics breaking down further. I climbed back up to the road and got in my truck. My hands were shaking again. Not from fear, well, maybe partly from fear, but from the wrongness of it all. Everything here violated the basic rules of reality. Roads that looped without turning. Stars in impossible positions. Water that existed in one place and not another, divided by an invisible line. I was in a place where the normal laws of nature didn't apply. Loop 15. The switchback was different again. The dead tree was gone. Completely gone. No sign it had ever been there. No stump. No disturbed ground. Nothing. But I'd seen it on the previous 14 loops. I'd gotten out and examined it. It had been real, now it wasn't there. Entry 14, 2:34 a.m. Dead tree has vanished entirely. No trace remains. Other landmarks still present. Things are being removed? Or reality is unstable here? I kept driving, but now I was looking for other changes. What else was different? What else had vanished or shifted? The guardrail section seemed shorter. Trees along the roadside were in slightly different positions. The curve of the road itself felt altered, though I couldn't pin down exactly how. Everything was shifting. Slowly, subtly, but consistently. Each loop, the road was a little different from the one before. Loop 16. I came around a curve and slammed on my brakes. There was another truck parked on the shoulder ahead. A semi just like mine. White cab with blue stripes, same make and model, same license plate. It was my truck. I sat there staring at it. My truck was ahead of me on the road. But I was in my truck. This didn't make sense. I put my truck in park and got out. Walked slowly toward the other vehicle. My flashlight raised. As I got closer, I could see details. The blue stripe had a small scratch on it, right below the passenger door. The same scratch my truck had, from where I'd scraped against a loading dock in Memphis 3 months ago. The trailer had the same serial number, the same mud pattern on the wheels, the same tie-down straps, arranged in the exact same configuration. This wasn't a similar truck, this was my truck, identical in every way. I walked up to the driver's side door and looked in the window. The cab was empty, but my logbook was on the dashboard. I could see it through the glass, open to a page with my handwriting on it. I tried the door handle, locked. I walked around the truck checking it from every angle. It was perfect match. Down to the tiniest detail. This was my truck. But my truck was behind me, the one I'd just gotten out of. I walked back to my truck, the one I'd been driving, and checked it carefully. Everything was as it should be. My coffee thermos in the cup holder, my jacket on the passenger seat, the specific arrangement of items in my cab. I looked back at the other truck. From here, I could see both vehicles. My truck behind me, my truck ahead of me. Same truck, in 2 places at once. Entry 15, 2:51 a.m. Found duplicate of my truck parked on shoulder. Identical in every detail. Both trucks exist simultaneously. Space isn't just looping, it's duplicating. I got back in my truck and drove past the duplicate. As I passed it, I watched it in my mirrors. It was still there, sitting on the shoulder, empty and silent. I continued driving. The road stretched ahead into the darkness. 3.2 miles later, I came back to the switchback. The duplicate truck was gone. The shoulder, where it had been parked, was empty. But when I checked my mirror, I could see something behind me. Far back in the distance, barely visible. Another truck, white with blue stripes, sitting on the shoulder. In the exact spot where I'd left my truck before completing this loop. The duplicate hadn't vanished, it had moved. Or I had looped back past it. Or time had shifted in a way that put it behind me instead of ahead. I couldn't tell which. Maybe all three were true at once. Loop 17. The CB radio crackled to life on its own. I hadn't touched it. The static resolved into words. A voice. My voice. "This is Wyatt Sloan. If anyone can hear me, I'm trapped on County Road 14. I've been driving in loops for hours. The road keeps bringing me back to the same place. My GPS isn't working. Time isn't working right. If you can hear this, send help, please." It was a recording of my earlier transmission, from loop 10, when I'd first tried the CB radio. But I was hearing it now, 7 loops later. Time was breaking down just like space. Events were happening out of sequence. Past and present were bleeding together. Entry 16:309 a.m. Hearing my own CB transmission from earlier loop. Time is non-linear here. Past events repeat or replay at wrong moments. The voice on the radio continued. "My name is Wyatt Sloan. I've been driving for 23 years. I've never seen anything like this. The road doesn't make sense. Distance doesn't work right. I keep ending up back where I started, but I never turn around. Something is wrong with this place. Something fundamental. If anyone hears this..." The static cut it off. When it cleared again, there were other voices. Multiple versions of me from different loops, all overlapping. Loop 14. The bridge. My truck appeared ahead of me. "Can't get out. 3.2 miles. Help me." I turned off the CB. I couldn't listen to my own voice, fractured across multiple timelines, all calling for help that never came. Loop 18. The gas station was different. The boards were gone from the windows. The door stood open. I stopped. Against my better judgment, I got out and approached. The interior was still frozen in time, still covered in dust. But now I could see it clearly without having to peer through gaps. The shelves, the counter, the cash register, and in the back, a figure. Someone standing in the shadows facing away from me. I froze. "Hello?" I called out. The figure didn't move. I took a step closer. "Do you need help? Are you okay?" Still nothing. I raised my flashlight, shining it directly at the figure. It was me, standing in the back of the gas station, wearing the same clothes I was wearing, holding a flashlight in the same hand, facing away from me, looking at something on the wall. I watched as the figure, as I, raised its flashlight and examined whatever was on the wall. The movement was familiar because I'd done it before, or would do it, or was doing it in another version of this moment. I backed away from the gas station, climbed into my truck, drove away without looking back. But I knew what I'd seen, a version of myself, from another loop, existing simultaneously with me. Past and present and future all collapsed into the same moment. Entry 17. 3:27 a.m. Saw myself in gas station. Another version from different loop. Multiple timelines exist at once here. Space and time completely non-linear. Loop 19. I was getting tired now. Really tired. I'd been driving for almost 10 hours, and most of that had been in this loop. My eyes were burning. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. I thought about stopping, pulling over and trying to sleep. But I was afraid that if I stopped, if I let myself rest, I might never wake up. Or I might wake up and find things even worse than they were. So I kept driving. The road surface was changing now. Each loop, it got rougher. More cracks, more potholes. Like it was aging rapidly, decades of wear compressed into hours. Some sections were crumbling away entirely. I had to swerve around holes that hadn't been there on the previous loop. The forest was dying too. The trees were losing their leaves, even though it was November and they'd already been bare. Now they were graying, turning to dead wood. Some were collapsing, falling across the road. I had to push through branches that scraped and tore at my truck. Everything was decaying, falling apart. Entry 18. 3:44 a.m. Road deteriorating rapidly. Forest dying. Everything breaking down. Loop maybe collapsing or reaching some kind of endpoint. Loop 20. The bridge was gone. Not the creek this time, the bridge itself. The stone structure had vanished, leaving just a gap in the road. On the far side, 50 feet away across the ravine, the road continued. I stopped at the edge and got out, looked down into the gorge. It was deep, maybe 40 feet to the bottom. Too far to jump, obviously, and no way to get my truck across. I was stuck. The loop had finally broken, or completed itself, or whatever the right term was for what had happened. I couldn't go forward anymore. The road ahead was inaccessible, but I also couldn't go back. I'd tried that before. Reversing just brought me to the same loop starting point, approaching from the same direction. I was trapped at this exact location. The bridge that should have been here was gone, and with it, my ability to continue. I sat down on the edge of the road, my legs dangling over the gap. I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. I'd been fighting this for hours, trying to understand it, trying to find a way out. And now I was at a dead end. I pulled out my logbook and made what I thought might be my final entry. Entry 19, 4:02 a.m. Bridge has disappeared. Can't continue forward. Can't go back. Trapped at loop terminus. Don't know what happens next. If someone finds this, tell Roy I tried to make the delivery. Tell my sister I'm sorry I didn't call more often. This place isn't natural. It's wrong. Something broke here. Reality broke. And I'm stuck in the break. I sat there for a long time. Maybe an hour, maybe more. Time didn't feel reliable here, so I couldn't be sure. The sky started to lighten. Not much. Just a subtle shift from black to deep blue. Dawn was coming. I wondered if the sunrise would change anything. If daylight would break whatever spell or anomaly had trapped me here. I wondered if I'd even see the sun. Maybe morning never came to this place. Maybe it was trapped in eternal night, just like I was trapped in eternal loop. But the sky kept lightening, blue becoming pink, becoming orange. And then I saw it. On the far side of the gap, where the road continued, there was movement. A vehicle approaching. A semi-truck. White cab with blue stripes, my truck. It drove up to the edge of the gap on the far side and stopped. The door opened and a figure climbed out, me. I watched as the other version of myself walked to the edge and looked across at me. Our eyes met. The other me raised a hand in greeting. Or maybe farewell. I couldn't tell which. Then he climbed back into his truck, backed up, and drove away, heading into the loop, to drive it again. Or for the first time, or for the 1,000th time. I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I was still here, still stuck. While another version of me was still driving, still searching for a way out that might not exist. The sun finally broke over the horizon. Golden light flooded across the mountains, burning away the darkness. And in that light I saw what I'd missed before. The road on the far side of the gap wasn't empty. It was crowded. Dozens of trucks, hundreds maybe, all identical to mine. White cabs with blue stripes, all parked on the shoulder, stretching as far as I could see into the distance. All waiting. Or maybe already gone. Empty husks left behind by drivers who'd given up, or succeeded, or transformed into something else. I stood up and looked down at my hands. They seemed solid enough, I felt real. But I'd seen versions of myself in the gas station, heard my voice on the CB from other loops. Was I the original, or was I just another copy, another echo, one more truck added to the collection? I didn't know. And as the sun climbed higher, bringing full daylight to this impossible place, I realized I might never know. The loop had ended, but I was still here, and somewhere behind me, the switchback waited. Ready for the next driver, ready to start counting again. 3.2 miles. Loop 1. The counting never stops. The sun brought no comfort. I'd hoped that daylight would somehow normalize things, that the impossibilities of the night would fade away like a bad dream. Instead, the light just made everything worse. It made the wrongness visible in terrible detail. I could see the gap where the bridge should have been. Not collapsed, not damaged, just absent, as if it had been carefully erased from reality. On the far side, that army of identical trucks sat in perfect rows, their blue stripes catching the morning sun. Each one was mine. Each one was empty. I'd walked back to my truck and sat in the cab for maybe 20 minutes, trying to decide what to do next. My logbook lay open on the passenger seat, filled with entries documenting my descent into this place. 20 loops recorded. 20 circuits of 3.2 miles each. 64 miles total. I should have been past Logan, past the delivery point, well into the next county by now. Instead, I was exactly where I'd been 10 hours ago. Maybe. Distance didn't seem to mean anything here. My phone still showed no signal. The time read 6:47 a.m. In a few hours, Roy would start making calls. By afternoon, I'd be officially missing. By evening, there'd be search parties. But they wouldn't find me, because I wasn't anywhere they could reach. I was in the fold. That's what one of the voices on the CB had said. You're in the bend. Or maybe, you're in the fold. The static had made it hard to hear clearly. But now I understood what it meant. This place was a crease in space, a fold. Somewhere that existed between actual locations, connected to County Road 14, but separate from it. A pocket dimension, if I wanted to get all science fiction about it. I didn't want to get science fiction about it. I wanted to get out. I started the engine. The familiar rumble was reassuring, a reminder that some things still worked normally. My truck still ran. The diesel still combusted. Internal combustion engines didn't care if they were in normal space or folded space. I put the truck in gear and drove forward, toward the gap where the bridge had been. I didn't know what I was planning to do. Jump it? The gap was 50 feet across, and there was no ramp. Even if I could get the truck airborne, I'd just fall into the gorge. But I drove toward it anyway because what else was I going to do? Sit and wait? Wait for what? For the fold to spit me back out? For rescue that couldn't come? For reality to fix itself? I accelerated, 30 miles per hour, 40, 50. The gap rushed toward me. At the last second, I closed my eyes and braced for the fall. Nothing happened. I opened my eyes. I was on the other side. The road stretched ahead of me, solid and whole. The gap was behind me now, visible in my mirrors. But I hadn't felt the truck leave the ground. Hadn't felt any transition. One moment I was approaching the gap, the next I was past it. I'd jumped 50 feet without jumping, or the gap had closed, or the road had extended, or I'd driven through a space that wasn't really there. I stopped the truck and sat there, trying to process what had just happened. The logical part of my brain, the part that was getting smaller and quieter with each impossible thing I witnessed, insisted that I must have driven across something. A temporary bridge, maybe. Something I hadn't seen in the daylight. But the rest of me knew better. The gap had been real. The absence had been absolute. And I'd driven through it anyway, because in this place, absence and presence weren't mutually exclusive states. I checked my odometer. It had ticked up the appropriate amount. I'd traveled 50 feet just like normal, but those 50 feet hadn't existed. I made another entry in my logbook. Entry 20. 6:59 a.m. Crossed gap where bridge should be. No sensation of jumping or transitioning. Road exists and doesn't exist simultaneously. Mathematics of space broken here. Distance is measured but not traveled, or traveled but not measured, can't tell which. I kept driving. The road ahead was crowded now with all those parked trucks. I had to slow down, weaving between them. Some were parked neatly on the shoulder, others were abandoned in the middle of the road, forcing me to navigate around them. As I passed each one, I looked in the cab. Every truck was empty. No drivers, no personal effects, nothing. Just empty cabs with the keys still in the ignition. Well, almost nothing. In the third truck I passed, I saw a logbook on the dashboard. I stopped and climbed down from my cab, walked over to the other truck and looked in the window. The logbook was open. I could read the handwriting through the glass. It looked like mine, but the entries were different. Entry 47. Lost count of loops. Tried to keep track, but numbers stopped making sense. Same landmarks, but different order. Same distance, but takes different amounts of time. This place doesn't follow linear progression. Entry 48. Saw myself driving past, waved. He didn't wave back. Maybe couldn't see me. Maybe I'm the one who's not really here. Entry 49. Bridge appeared and disappeared 3 times during last loop. Sometimes it's there when I arrive, gone when I try to cross. Sometimes absent on approach, but present when I reach the gap. Reality is choosing randomly what exists and what doesn't. Entry 50. I think I'm done. Going to walk away from the truck. See if I can find another way out. If you're reading this, if there's anyone after me who gets stuck here, count the loops. The number matters. I don't know why yet, but it matters. That was the last entry. The rest of the pages were blank. I looked around, but there was no sign of the driver, no footprints, no indication which direction he'd walked. He'd simply disappeared, leaving his truck and his logbook behind. I went back to my truck and continued driving, past more abandoned vehicles, counted them as I went. 12, 20, 35. 47 trucks total, all identical to mine, all empty, all clustered in this section of the fold. 47 drivers who'd gotten trapped before me. 47 people who'd found this impossible road and couldn't escape. What had happened to them? Had they walked away like the driver of truck number 3 searching for another exit? Were they still wandering somewhere in this fold, lost between loops? Or had something else happened to them? I reached the switchback, the starting point of the loop. The dead tree was back, leaning at its original angle. Like the previous loops where it had moved or vanished had never happened. Everything had reset. I stopped and got out, walked up to the tree and put my hand on it. The wood was solid, real, definitely there. But it hadn't been there last loop. I'd written it in my logbook. The tree had vanished completely, and now it was back. This place wasn't just looping in space, it was looping in time too. Or maybe looping wasn't the right word. Maybe it was cycling through different configurations. The same basic structure. The switchback, the valley, the bridge, the gas station. But the details changed each time. The tree present or absent. The creek flowing or dry. The bridge existing or gone. Schrodinger's road. Every element simultaneously real and unreal until you observed it, and then it became one or the other, chosen at random by whatever broken physics governed this place. I heard an engine behind me. I turned around and saw a truck approaching. White cab with blue stripes, my truck. but I was standing next to my truck. It was right there, parked at the switchback. Another truck, another me. It slowed as it approached, then stopped about 20 yards away. The driver's door opened, and I climbed out. No, not me. Someone who looked like me, wearing the same clothes, but different somehow. Older, maybe. More tired. Like he'd been driving for days instead of hours. He walked toward me slowly, his hands visible at his sides. Non-threatening. Just another driver who'd gotten trapped. "How many loops?" he asked. His voice was rough, hoarse from disuse. 20, I said. "You?" "Lost count after 60. He looked around at the forest, the road, the dead tree. "This your first time at the switchback since dawn?" "Yeah, just got here." He nodded. "Then you've still got time. Listen to me carefully. You need to count the loops. Don't lose track. The number matters." "Why? What happens?" "At certain numbers, things change. The configuration shifts. New routes become available. At loop 27, a side road appears just past the gas station. At loop 44, the bridge becomes solid. Doesn't phase in and out, just stays real. At loop 68, the fold starts to collapse. That's when you can get out." "How do you know this?" He pulled out a piece of paper, worn and folded many times. Unfolded it carefully and showed it to me. It was covered in notes, diagrams, equations, the mathematics of the fold. "I figured it out," he said. "Took me weeks, or what felt like weeks. Time doesn't work right here, but I found the pattern. The fold operates on a cycle, 68 loops. After that, it resets completely, and there's a brief window when you can drive back out to the real world. So, why are you still here? Why didn't you escape?" His expression darkened. "I did escape. Got to loop 68, found the exit, drove back onto County Road 14. Made it 5 miles down the real road before I saw the detour sign again. Route 119 closed. Detour at exit 12. Same sign that brought me here the first time." He paused, looking down at his hands. "I tried to drive past it, ignored the detour, but the road changed, literally changed in front of me. What was Route 119 became the access road to the fold. Like the fold was reaching out, pulling me back. I couldn't escape. I ended up right back here, starting loop 1 again." "That's impossible. You're standing in a place where roads loop without turning, and bridges exist and don't exist at the same time. You already know impossible doesn't mean anything here." He refolded the paper and handed it to me. "Take this, it's got all my notes. The numbers, the patterns, the safe configurations. You're only at loop 20, you've still got a chance. Get to loop 68, find the exit and drive as fast as you can. Don't stop, don't look back. Maybe you'll make it farther than I did." I took the paper. It was covered in dense handwriting. Mathematical formulas I didn't understand. Diagrams showing the road from different angles. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Keep trying. I'm on my 3rd cycle. Maybe the 3rd time's the charm. Maybe, after 136 loops total, the fold will let me go." He didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe I'll just keep driving forever, cycling through this same road over and over, until I forget what the real world looks like." He walked back to his truck and climbed in, started the engine. "Don't stop counting," he called out through the window. "The number is everything." He drove away, heading into the loop. I watched until he disappeared around a curve, then looked down at the paper in my hands. The top of the page had a title, written in careful block letters. "The Topology of Trapped Space, a Driver's Guide." Below that, Yashat, the first note. "You are not on a road. You are in the space between roads. The fold exists because something went wrong during the construction of County Road 14. The surveyors measured incorrectly. The road crew paved in the wrong location. And reality collapsed into the gap between where the road should be and where they built it. This fold is the scar tissue of space trying to heal itself. I sat down on the ground, my back against my truck's front tire, and started reading. The notes were extensive, mathematical. The other driver, other me, had spent an enormous amount of time analyzing this place, looking for patterns, trying to understand the rules, and he'd found them. Sort of. The fold operated on a 68-loop cycle. Each loop changed the configuration slightly, rotating through different states. Some states were more stable than others. Some offered opportunities to escape. Loop 27. Side road appears past gas station. Road is real, but leads deeper into fold, not out. Do not take it. Loop 33. All parked trucks vanish. You will be alone. Do not panic. They return at loop 34. Loop 44. Bridge solidifies. Safe to cross multiple times. Window of stability lasts until loop 48. Loop 51. Duplicate of your truck will appear ahead of you. Do not approach it. Do not look in the cab. Keep driving. Loop 58. Radio picks up actual broadcasts from real world. Ignore them. They are time delayed by several days. Responding will only confuse future rescue attempts. Loop 63. You will see the exit. A sign pointing back to Route 119. Do not take it yet. It is a false exit. Taking it at Loop 63 leads to another fold, possibly worse than this one. Loop 68. The real exit appears. Sign will say detour ends. Take it immediately. Drive at maximum safe speed. Do not stop for any reason until you have traveled at least 50 miles on the real road. I kept reading. The notes got more detailed, more desperate. Near the end, the handwriting became harder to read, like it had been written quickly or while the truck was moving. Loop 95, second cycle. Fold is aware of attempts to escape. It actively works to prevent exit. The detour sign will appear on real roads, pulling you back. May need to find alternate routes away from West Virginia entirely. Loop 132, third cycle, still ongoing. I think the fold is alive. Not conscious, but aware. Like a trap that has learned to recognize prey trying to escape. It knows me now, knows my truck. Will reach out into the real world to reclaim me. May be impossible to fully escape. Can only hope it loses interest if I manage to get far enough away. The notes ended there. No conclusion, no final entry. Just those last desperate words and then blank pages. I folded the paper carefully and put it in my pocket. Looked at my watch. 7:43 a.m. I was at loop 20. I needed to complete 48 more loops to reach the exit point. At roughly 15 minutes per loop, that was 12 hours. Midnight tonight, I'd reach loop 68 and have my chance. 12 more hours of driving the same 3.2 miles, over and over, watching reality decay and rebuild and decay again around me. 12 more hours of seeing my truck parked on the shoulder, empty and waiting. 12 more hours of voices in the static and bridges that existed in superposition and stars in impossible configurations. I could do this. I'd driven longer hauls than 12 hours. Hell, I'd done 20-hour shifts before, back when I was younger and stupider and thought I was invincible. But this was different. This wasn't just exhaustion. This was ontological horror. Every loop stripped away another layer of certainty about what was real and what was possible. Every circuit through the fold made me less sure that I existed. That I was the original Wyatt Sloan and not just another copy. another echo left behind in this pocket of broken space. I stood up, brushed off my pants, and climbed back into my truck. Started the engine. Put it in gear. Loop 21. I had 47 more to go, and then I'd find out if the fold would let me leave, or if I'd just join all the other drivers who'd tried and failed, leaving another empty truck on the shoulder as a warning to whoever came next. The odometer rolled over. 3.2 miles, loop 22. I started counting aloud. 22, 46 to go. The truck responded smoothly. The engine purred. Everything mechanical still worked perfectly. It was only space and time and reality that were broken. Just those little things. 23:45 to go. The gas station appeared on my left. The door stood open, and I could see movement inside. Another version of me, examining the walls, looking for answers in a place that only offered more questions. I didn't stop. The notes had warned about loop 27, but not about anything at 23. Safe to keep driving. 24:44 to go. The bridge was solid now, its stone arches reassuringly real. The creek below flowed east to west, water sparkling in the morning sun. Everything looked normal, almost, except for the fact that I'd driven across this exact bridge 23 times already, and I'd be driving across it 44 more times before this was over. 25:43 to go. My voice was getting hoarse from counting aloud, but I had to keep doing it. Had to maintain focus. The moment I lost count, I'd lose track of where I was in the cycle, and missing the exit at loop 68 would mean starting over. Another 68 loops, another 12 hours. I didn't think I could handle that. One cycle through this hell was enough. 26:42 to go. The switchback loomed ahead. The dead tree was still there, still leaning at that familiar angle. I took the curve smoothly, my trailer swinging wide but staying on the road. 3.2 miles, loop 26 complete. 27:41 to go. This was it. The notes had warned about loop 27. A side road would appear past the gas station. Don't take it. I watched carefully as I approached the gas station. The building looked different now, less abandoned, more recently used. The boards were back on the windows, but they looked newer. Fresh wood instead of weathered gray. Past the station, I saw it. A gravel road branching off to the right, heading into the forest. A small wooden sign at the junction. Alternate route. It was tempting. A different road meant a different direction. Maybe a way out that didn't require 41 more loops. But the notes had been clear. This road led deeper into the fold, not out of it. I drove past without slowing. Watched it disappear in my mirrors. 28:40 to go. My phone rang. I nearly swerved off the road in shock. My phone had been dead, no signal, for the past 10 hours. Now it was ringing, the screen lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID said Roy Maddox, my dispatcher, calling to check on the delivery, probably, wondering why I hadn't reported in. I answered it. Roy? Static. Just like the CB radio. But underneath it, I could hear a voice, faint, distorted. Wyatt? That you? Can barely... Where are you? Roy, I'm stuck. I took a detour off Route 119 and got lost. I'm more static. When Roy's voice came back, it was clearer but strange, wrong. Made the delivery already, Wyatt. 3 days ago. You delivered to Logan 3 days ago. Where have you been since then? 3 days. That was impossible. I'd only been in the fold for 12 hours. Less than that. It was still the same day, just morning now instead of night. Roy, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't made the delivery yet. I'm still trying to get there. Wyatt, you need to listen to me. We found your truck. The call dropped. The phone screen went black, then displayed no service again. I stared at it, my hands shaking. Roy had said 3 days. Said I'd already made the delivery, said they'd found my truck. But I was in my truck. I was driving it right now. Unless time in the fold and time in the real world didn't sync up. Unless I'd been here much longer than I thought. Unless those 12 hours I'd experienced had been 3 days out there. Or unless the fold had spit out one of the duplicate trucks, one of the empty ones, and rescue teams had found it and assumed it was mine, assumed I'd disappeared or died or been abducted, while the real me, or a version of me, was still trapped here, still driving, still counting loops. 29, I said aloud, forcing my voice to stay steady. 39 to go. The bridge appeared ahead. I crossed it without slowing, not trusting it to stay solid. 30. 38 to go. The numbers became a mantra, a rhythm, something to hold on to while everything else dissolved into uncertainty. 31, 37 to go. 32, 36 to go. 33, 35 to go. Loop 33, the notes had said something about this loop. I pulled out the paper and checked. Loop 33. All parked trucks vanish. You will be alone. Do not panic. They return at loop 34. I looked ahead at the road. The shoulder was empty. All 47 trucks that had been parked there, all those identical white cabs with blue stripes, were gone. Completely vanished. I was alone on the road now. Just me and my truck and 3.2 miles of pavement that looped back on itself forever. The silence was oppressive. Before, even with no other drivers visible, I'd known they were there. Empty trucks lined up like tombstones, marking the graves of people who'd gotten stuck just like me. Their presence had been reassuring in a weird way. Proof that others had experienced this, that I wasn't crazy or hallucinating. Now they were gone, and I was alone. Truly alone, in a way I'd never been before. Not just isolated, but separated from all other existence. The only person in a pocket dimension, driving a road that shouldn't exist. 34, I whispered. 34 to go. The trucks reappeared. All of them exactly where they'd been before. Like they'd never left. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. 35, 33 to go. Time started to blur. The loops ran together. I'd count, reach the switchback, count again, pass the gas station, count, cross the bridge, count, back to the switchback. 40, 28 to go. 45, 23 to go. 50, 18 to go. Loop 51. The notes had warned about this one too. Loop 51. Duplicate of your truck will appear ahead of you. Do not approach it. Do not look in the cab. Keep driving. There it was. Right in the middle of the road. Impossible to avoid or ignore. My truck, parked at an angle that blocked both lanes. I slowed as I approached, looking for room to squeeze past on the shoulder. The truck was positioned perfectly to force me to either stop or drive very close to it. I chose close, steered my truck onto the narrow shoulder, my passenger side mirrors inches from the parked truck's driver side mirrors, crawled past at maybe 5 miles per hour. Don't look in the cab, the notes had said. But I looked. I couldn't help it. The cab wasn't empty. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, slumped forward, head resting on the steering wheel, arms hanging loose at their sides. Me. It was me sitting there, dead or unconscious or something else. I accelerated past, heart pounding. Didn't stop. Didn't investigate. Just kept driving until the duplicate truck was far behind me. When I checked my mirror, it was gone. The road behind me was empty again. 52, I said, my voice shaking. 16 to go. I wish I could tell you exactly what happened during loops 52 through 67, but the truth is, I don't remember them clearly. They blurred together into a nightmare fugue of repetitive motion and slowly disintegrating sanity. I remember the numbers. I kept counting, never lost track. 53, 54, 55. I remember the physical sensations. My hands going numb from gripping the wheel, my eyes burning from staring at the road, my voice getting hoarser and hoarser from counting aloud. But I also remember things I wish I could forget, details that even now make me question whether I truly escaped or if I'm still driving, still counting, trapped in some deeper layer of the fold that I haven't recognized yet. Loop 52. I noticed my reflection in the rearview mirror, but it was delayed. I'd turn my head, and the reflection would turn a second later. Like the image was traveling through some distance before reaching the mirror. I tested it, moving my hand up and down, watching the reflection lag behind. By the end of the loop, the delay was 3 full seconds. I was watching my past self in the mirror. Loop 53. The road itself started changing texture under my tires. Parts of it felt normal, solid pavement, but other sections, I'd swear they felt soft, almost spongy, like I was driving on rubber or foam. The truck would bounce slightly, my suspension reacting to a surface that shouldn't compress like that. But when I stopped and got out to look, the pavement appeared normal, solid, immovable. Loop 54. I found items in my cab that I didn't recognize. A coffee cup I'd never owned, filled with cold coffee. A jacket draped over my passenger seat, wrong size, wrong color. A photograph tucked into my sun visor, a family I'd never seen, smiling at a camera I didn't remember. These things appeared gradually, one item per loop, like my truck was being colonized by artifacts from other versions of itself. Loop 55. The counting began to hurt, physically hurt. Each time I said the number aloud, my throat burned. My tongue felt thick and unwieldy. By the end of the loop, speaking the words 55 made my mouth bleed. Small cuts appeared on the inside of my cheeks, on my tongue, like the act of naming the number was cutting me from the inside. Loop 56. I saw myself driving in the opposite direction. Not a duplicate truck, my actual truck, with me in it, passing me going the other way on this single-lane road. I watched myself approach, watched my own face staring back at me through my windshield. We made eye contact. The other me looked terrified. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Then we passed through each other. No collision, no sensation of impact. Just two versions of the same moment occupying the same space for an instant. Loop 57. The temperature inside my cab started fluctuating wildly. 1 minute it would be 70 degrees, comfortable. The next, it would spike to 90, 100, 110. I'd be sweating, struggling to breathe in the heat. Then it would plummet to freezing, my breath fogging, frost forming on the inside of my windows. The heater gauge didn't change. The outside temperature remained constant. Only the space inside my cab was cycling through thermal extremes. At Loop 58, the radio picked up a news broadcast. Clear as day, no static. A reporter talking about a missing truck driver named Wyatt Sloan, last seen 5 days ago in Charleston. 5 days. Not 12 hours. 5 days. I listened to the entire broadcast, my hands shaking on the wheel. They described my truck, my route, my last known location. They interviewed Roy, who sounded distraught, talking about how I was a reliable driver, how this wasn't like me. They interviewed my ex-wife, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, crying on air about how she hoped I'd be found safe. The reporter mentioned search parties, said they'd been looking for me across 3 counties, that the state police had mounted their largest search operation in years, that volunteers were checking every back road, every pullout, every possible location where a truck might have gone off the road. But they couldn't find me, because I wasn't anywhere they could reach. I was in a place that existed sideways to reality, in a fold that their searches couldn't penetrate. Loop 59. I started seeing messages carved into the trees alongside the road. Deep gouges in the bark, forming words in capital letters. Loop 59 is the recognition. Loop, you are not the first Wyatt. You will not be the last, count carefully. I stopped the truck and got out to examine them. The carvings were fresh, sap still oozing from the cuts. But I hadn't seen anyone carving, hadn't seen any other person or truck except the duplicates of my own. Loop 60. My logbook started filling itself in. I'd write an entry, set the pen down, and when I looked back there would be additional notes below mine. Different handwriting, different observations. All signed W.S., my initials, my future self, somehow reaching back to warn or guide my present self. The messages were cryptic. Don't trust Loop 63. The bridge at 65 is optional. You can't skip ahead by speeding. The fold wants you to miscount. At Loop 61, I saw another driver walking along the shoulder. Not driving a truck, just walking. He turned to look at me as I passed, and his eyes were empty. Not closed, not dead, just empty. Like someone had scooped out everything behind them and left just the surface features. I slowed down, rolled down my window. Hey, are you okay? Do you need help? He stopped walking, turned to face me fully. His mouth opened, and instead of words I heard the sound of wind. That same tunnel wind sound I'd heard on the CB radio back in the early loops. And underneath it, very faint, I heard counting. Different numbers, overlapping. 42, 99, 137, 208. He was counting loops. Or he had been before something happened to him. Before he became this hollow thing. This echo of a driver who'd failed to escape. I drove away fast, not looking back. But I could feel his empty gaze following me, tracking my truck until I rounded the curve and left him behind. Loop 62. Reality began fragmenting at the edges. Parts of the forest would simply not be there. I'd be driving along, looking at the trees, and suddenly there would be a gap. Not like a clearing, a gap. Empty space where trees should be but weren't. Looking into it made my eyes hurt, made my brain try to interpret nothingness and fail. The gaps grew larger as the loop progressed. By the time I reached the switchback, half the forest was missing. I was driving through a world that was only partially rendered, with huge sections of existence just absent. Loop 63. Everything reversed. I was driving forward, but the scenery was moving backward. The switchback appeared behind me, even though I hadn't reached it yet. The bridge crossed over me from the wrong direction. The gas station's lights shone from tomorrow, casting shadows that fell the wrong way. My logbook had warned me about this loop. Don't trust Loop 63. Now I understood why. This was the disorientation loop, the one designed to make you lose count, to make you uncertain about which direction was forward and which was back. I closed my eyes and drove by feel, trusting my truck's momentum, refusing to let my senses convince me I was going the wrong way. When I opened them again, I was at the switchback. Loop 63 complete. At Loop 64, the sun set and rose again in the space of 3.2 miles. Dawn to dusk to dawn, all in 15 minutes. But it was worse than just rapid celestial movement. The sun itself was wrong. It rose in the west, too large, too red. It crossed the sky in a jerking motion, stopping and starting, like a projector skipping frames. When it set in the east, it left streaks of darkness across the sky, after images of its passage that didn't fade, and for a brief moment at the height of its arc, I could see through it. The sun became transparent, and behind it was something else. Another sky with different stars, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. Loop 65. I drove across the bridge and felt it dissolve beneath me. Not collapse. Dissolve. The stones simply ceased to be solid, became momentarily gaseous, and my truck passed through them like passing through fog. For those few seconds, I was suspended over the gorge with nothing supporting me, held aloft by momentum alone, or by some property of the fold that didn't care about gravity. Then the bridge resolidified behind me, and I was on solid ground again, my heart hammering, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Loop 66. I started forgetting things. Not the count, I never lost the count, but other things. My mother's face. The name of my first truck. What year I started driving. Memories were being stripped away, deleted to make room for the endless repetition of these 3.2 miles. The fold was hollowing me out, making space for itself inside my mind. Loop 67. I saw the end of all things. The forest caught fire, flames consuming everything in an instant. The road melted, becoming a river of tar. The sky cracked like glass, fragments falling and dissolving before they hit the ground. My truck kept driving through it all, untouched, as the world around me underwent apocalypse. And then it reset. The flames vanished. The road resolidified. The sky healed itself. Everything back to normal, like the destruction had never happened. But I knew it had. I'd seen it. The fold showing me what waited at the end, not escape, but annihilation. The ultimate consequence of driving forever, of counting past infinity. And somewhere in there, I stopped being afraid. Not because I felt brave, but because fear requires energy, and I had none left. I was running on fumes. My body wanted to sleep, my mind wanted to shut down. But I kept driving, kept counting, because stopping meant becoming like that hollow-eyed driver I'd seen walking the shoulder. Meant joining the empty trucks parked along the road. Meant being absorbed into the fold completely, becoming just another warning that future drivers would ignore. 65, 3 to go. 66, 2 to go. 67, 1 to go. Loop 68. This was it. The exit loop. The window when the fold would let me go, if it was going to let me go at all. I'd expected it to feel different, special somehow. But it was just another circuit. Same switchback, same road, same 3.2 miles. But I watched carefully, looking for the sign. Detour ends. That's what the notes had said. A simple sign marking the end of the detour, pointing me back to Route 119. I passed the switchback, no sign. Descended into the valley, crossed the bridge. No sign. Past the gas station, no sign. Had I miscounted? Was I really on Loop 68, or had I made an error somewhere in the blur of the last 16 loops? No, I'd been careful. I'd marked each loop in my logbook, kept a running tally. This was 68. So where was the exit? I completed the loop. Arrived back at the switchback. Nothing had changed. I sat there, engine idling, staring at the dead tree. My last hope had just evaporated. The notes were wrong, or I'd done something wrong, or the fold had changed its rules. I was never getting out. I put my head down on the steering wheel, ready to give up, ready to accept that this was my life now. Eternal driver on an impossible road, completing an endless series of 3.2-mile loops until I died or went insane, or became one of those empty-eyed figures walking along the shoulder. Then I heard it. A voice on the CB radio, clear and strong, no static. Wyatt Sloan, this is West Virginia State Police. If you can hear this transmission, please respond. I grabbed the microphone so fast I almost dropped it. This is Wyatt Sloan. I can hear you. I'm stuck on County Road 14. I've been driving in loops for... Mr. Sloan, we've located your truck. We're at mile marker 12 on County Road 14. Can you see us? I looked around. The road was empty. Just forest and pavement and that goddamn switchback. Negative. I don't see anyone. I'm at some kind of switchback. I think I'm in a... Mr. Sloan, your truck is stationary. You've been stationary for 6 days. We've been trying to reach you, but you haven't responded to any attempts at contact. Are you injured? 6 days. The fold had dilated time even more than I'd thought. I'm not stationary, I said. I'm driving. I've been driving for hours. And then I understood. I looked down at my hands on the steering wheel. They looked solid enough, real enough. But I'd been driving for 12 hours. No, 6 days. No, both, neither. The fold hadn't just trapped my truck, it had trapped me. My consciousness was in here, experiencing the loops, while my body sat stationary somewhere on the real County Road 14. Maybe I was unconscious. Maybe I was in a coma. Maybe I'd had a stroke or an aneurysm, and this entire experience was just my dying brain trying to make sense of failing neurons. Mr. Sloan, can you hear me? We're approaching your vehicle now. I looked up. Through my windshield, I could see 2 figures walking toward me out of the forest. State troopers, their uniforms visible in the morning light. But they weren't walking on the road, they were walking through it. Like the road wasn't real to them, or they weren't real to me, or we existed in slightly different versions of space that overlapped but didn't fully connect. They reached my truck. One of them, a tall man with gray hair, walked up to my driver's side window, looked right at me, then reached through the window, through the glass, and touched my shoulder. I felt it, felt his hand on my shoulder, solid and real. Mr. Sloan, he said, and his voice came through the CB radio and through the window and through some other channel I couldn't identify. You need to wake up now. I am awake, I said. I've been awake for 6 days. No, you haven't. You've been unconscious. You crashed your truck 6 days ago. Went off the road at the detour point on County Road 14. Took us this long to find you. The truck went down a ravine, ended up in dense forest. We couldn't spot it from the air. I looked around at the fold, the switchback, the dead tree, the road that looped forever. This isn't real? I asked. It's real to you. Trauma does strange things to the mind. You've been here, in this place, for 6 days while your body lay unconscious in the wreckage. But we're pulling you out now. You need to let go of this place. You need to wake up. I looked down at my hands again. They were fading, becoming translucent. I could see through them to the steering wheel beneath. The fold was releasing me. Or I was releasing myself from the fold. Hard to tell which. What about the other drivers? I asked. The other trucks? All the people who got stuck before me? The trooper's expression was sad. We've found 7 vehicles in this area over the past 20 years. None of the drivers survived. You're the first one we've been able to reach in time. 7 vehicles. Not 47, not hundreds. The other trucks had been part of the fold. Projections, echoes, manifestations of my fear that I'd end up like them, dead and forgotten. My truck found empty in the woods. None of it had been real, except the fear. That had been real. I counted 68 loops, I said. I counted so carefully. You've been unconscious for 6 days. You've been dreaming. The loops, the gas station, the voices on the radio, all parts of your mind trying to make sense of the trauma, trying to give you a puzzle to solve, a path to follow back to consciousness. My truck was dissolving around me now, the cab fading, the dashboard becoming transparent. Through it, I could see trees, real trees, in a real forest, and emergency vehicles, their lights flashing red and blue. The mathematics, I said weakly. The fold. It was all so detailed. Your mind is an incredible thing, Mr. Sloan. Even in trauma, even unconscious, it builds coherent narratives. You're a driver. You understand roads, navigation, distance. So your mind built you a road, and it made you drive it until we could reach you. I felt other hands on me now. EMTs pulling me from the wreckage. Real hands, with real weight. The fold fell away. The eternal road dissolved into morning light and forest sounds and the smell of gasoline and oil. My last view through the dissolving windshield was of the switchback. The dead tree still stood there, leaning at its impossible angle. And standing beside it, watching me leave, was another figure. Another driver, another version of me. He raised his hand in farewell. Or maybe warning. I tried to say something, tried to tell the EMTs about him, but my voice wouldn't work anymore. The fold had held on to it, kept it for itself. A small price for letting me go. They pulled me free, laid me on a stretcher, loaded me into an ambulance. I closed my eyes, really closed them, not the dream closing I'd been doing for 6 days, and let myself fall into real sleep. I woke up in a hospital 3 days later. The doctors said I'd been lucky. Concussion, broken ribs, internal bruising, but nothing that wouldn't heal. A few more days in the wreck and I would have died of dehydration. Roy came to visit on the 2nd day after I woke up. Brought flowers, which was weirdly touching for a gruff guy like him. "Glad you're okay," he said. "Had us worried there for a while." "Sorry about the load," I said. "I didn't make the delivery." He waved that away. "Fuck the load. You're alive, that's what matters." We talked for a while about what happened. I told him about the detour, about taking the exit onto County Road 14. He listened, frowning. "That's the weird thing," he said finally. "There was no detour. Route 119 was open that night. No rock slide, no construction, nothing. We checked with the state DOT. But I saw the sign. Digital board, orange letters. Route 119 closed, detour at exit 12. There was no sign, Wyatt. We sent people out there to check. Nothing. Which means either someone put up a fake sign, for what purpose I can't imagine, or... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Or I'd hallucinated the sign. Seen something that wasn't there and followed it off the real road into whatever had been waiting in the forest. After Roy left, I lay in bed and thought about the fold. About the loops and the counting and the voices and the static. The doctors said it had been a dream, a trauma response. My mind creating a narrative to explain my unconscious state. But it had felt so real. The truck, the road, the impossible geometry. The other drivers, the warnings, the notes about the 68-loop cycle. I reached for my jacket, draped over the chair beside the bed, dug in the pocket. The paper was there. The notes from the other driver, the one who'd given me the guide to the fold. The topology of trapped space. A driver's guide. I unfolded it with shaking hands. If this was real, if these notes existed outside my dream, then maybe... The paper was blank. Just a blank sheet, yellowed and worn like it had been folded and unfolded many times. But no writing, no diagrams, no mathematical formulas. I'd imagined it all, the entire thing. 68 loops through a pocket dimension that existed only in my injured brain. I crumpled the paper and threw it across the room. But later, after the nurses had checked on me and turned off the lights and left me alone in the dark, I got up, retrieved the paper, smoothed it out, held it up to the window, where streetlight from the parking lot filtered in, and saw the faintest impression. Not writing, not exactly, but indentations in the paper, like someone had written on a sheet placed above this one, and the pressure had transferred through. I couldn't make out words, but I could see the pattern, the structure, lists and numbers and diagrams, proof that something had been written there, or proof that my mind was still trapped, still seeing things that weren't real. I folded the paper carefully and put it back in my jacket pocket. 3 months later, I was back on the road. Light duty at first, short hauls, daytime only. The company had been good about it. Let me ease back into things at my own pace. I'd requested one thing: no routes through West Virginia. Roy had agreed without asking why. But contracts changed, companies merged, routes got reassigned, and eventually, inevitably, I found myself with a load heading south through West Virginia. Different start point, different destination, but the route took me within 10 miles of where I'd crashed. I could have refused, could have told Roy I wouldn't do it. But that felt like surrender, like letting the fold win, even though the fold had never really existed. So I took the load. The drive was fine. Clear weather, good roads, no problems. I passed within 5 miles of County Road 14 and didn't even feel a twinge of anxiety. See? I told myself. It was all in your head. Just trauma, nothing to fear. I made my delivery, stayed overnight at a truck stop, headed back north the next morning. That's when I saw the sign. Digital board, orange letters on black background. Exactly like the one I'd seen 3 months ago. Route 119, closed ahead. Detour at exit 12. Follow. Posted signs. I stopped the truck. Sat there on the shoulder, staring at the sign. It wasn't real, couldn't be real. Roy had confirmed there'd been no detour that night. The state DOT had no record of any construction or closures. This was just my mind playing tricks. Post-traumatic stress, creating a phantom sign because some part of me hadn't let go of the fold yet. I put the truck in gear and drove forward, past the sign, ignoring it. The road was open ahead. No construction, no rock slide, no barriers, just normal highway, exactly as it should be. I'd been right. The sign was a hallucination, nothing more. But when I checked my mirror, I could still see it behind me, its orange letters glowing in the morning light. And beyond it, barely visible in the distance, I could see a truck taking the exit. White cab with blue stripes. I watched in the mirror until it disappeared around a curve, following the detour onto County Road 14, following the signs that led to the fold. I drive faster now, keep my eyes forward. Don't look at signs too carefully. Don't trust detours. Don't stop on empty roads even when my truck says I need to. Because I know the truth now. The fold wasn't just in my head. Or maybe it was, but that doesn't make it less real. Trauma or genuine anomaly, hallucination or pocket dimension, the distinction doesn't matter. What matters is that somewhere in the mountains of West Virginia, there's a road that loops back on itself. 3.2 miles that connect to nothing and lead nowhere. A switchback that waits for drivers who take the wrong turn, follow the wrong sign, end up in the wrong version of space. And every 68 loops, it lets someone go. Releases them back to the real world, damaged but alive. But first you have to count. Have to drive the loops over and over. Watching your own truck multiply around you, seeing yourself in mirrors and windows on the wrong side of bridges that exist and don't exist simultaneously. First, you have to survive the fold. I did survive. I'm the proof. I'm back on the road, making deliveries, living my life. But sometimes, late at night on empty highways, I see signs that no one else sees. Detours that lead to roads not marked on any map. And I wonder how many drivers take those exits. How many follow the signs into their own personal folds, trapped in loops they don't understand, counting circuits through impossible space. And I wonder if they'll count correctly, if they'll reach loop 68 and find their exit, or if they'll miscount, or give up, or lose themselves in the mathematics of nowhere, and become just another empty truck on the shoulder. Another warning that no one will heed. I still have the paper, the blank sheet with its phantom impressions. I carry it with me always, in my jacket pocket. Proof that the fold was real, or proof that my mind is still creating evidence for something that never happened. I honestly don't know which. What I do know is this: the road is still there. Still waiting, still counting. And somewhere right now, another driver is taking exit 12, following the detour signs onto County Road 14, beginning loop 1. I can't save them, can't warn them, can't do anything except hope they're better at counting than I was. 3.2 miles, 68 loops, and if you're lucky, if you count carefully and don't lose track and don't give up, you might get out, might. But the fold is patient and hungry, and it knows your name now. It knows all our names. We just don't know it's calling us. Not until we see the sign.